Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of the murder part. Tonight we'll be looking at the case of Noura Jackson. So I'm here with my co-host. We'll do a brief round of introductions. I'll start with Jeff. How you doing, Jeff?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jeff Pincin. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor in Delaware and Pennsylvania. I specialize in the treatment of obsessive-compulsive disorder and other obsessive-compulsive disorders, similar ones. And happy to be here tonight.
Very good, very good. So if you weren't a mental health counselor, what occupation would you have wanted to be?
What I really wanted to do, I was so dead set on being a Methodist minister with an on-again, off-again girlfriend. And it was so attainable, right? I could have done it.
But you settled down with one person. Like, you got married.
Yeah, and didn't become a Methodist minister.
That too.
Had to become a counselor, mental health counselor.
So you lost on both those dreams.
Yeah, just shot down.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, just terrible.
So terrible.
I appreciate the support.
Yeah, it's a tough break. Methodist minister with the girlfriend on and off really is the dream.
Yeah.
You were right there.
So close. Just didn't happen.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of pieces that have to come together.
Oh, yeah. There's multiple variables there. Yeah.
Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
Tell us about yourself.
My name is Mike Smith. I am also a licensed professional counselor of mental health. I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. I focus in narrative therapy and geek therapy. I'm a self-styled expert in all things geek.
Very good. So if you weren't a counselor, what occupational choice would you have preferred?
I've always loved money. I just wish I could have been a bonds trader.
Oh, yeah.
Bonds trader, just trading bonds, making money, making moves. Right? Unfortunately, I didn't have the aptitude for it, so I had to settle for becoming a counselor.
So, kind of a disappointment.
Yeah.
So is that trading James Bond? Is that...
No, but I could see a business in doing that, getting trading cards of James Bonds, various different bonds. There's been a bunch of them, and you just trade them with other people.
Not a bad career.
It's like I've got 3 Sean Connerys. I'll see you for Daniel Craig. Nobody wants the Roger Moore's for some reason.
Right, you have to get like 20 of those to get one Sean Connery.
And the George Lazenbys, there's millions of them just sitting around because nobody wants them at all. But yeah, bonds trading would have been great, but unfortunately, I had to settle for the mental health counseling field.
Sorry to hear that, Mike.
Yeah,
maybe next time.
It's rough.
It's just like a trail of shattered dreams.
Yes.
How about you, Dr. Grande?
I think a corrupt prosecutor.
Oh,
not just a prosecutor, but a corrupt
one. Yeah.
Corrupt one. You have to be a corrupt prosecutor.
It's one of the only occupations where you can be corrupt and you still get celebrated and promoted and elected. It's just a great kind of area there to fulfill the dream.
I think that's one of the main careers that you see on a career day, like in elementary school or something. And now, get ready, everybody. Get all excited.
My dad could beat your dad. He's a corrupt prosecutor.
Oh, you're right. He can. Oh, no.
Well, like on career day, they have the people come into the various classrooms, like in high school. And then there's like the prosecutor room. There's like 3 or 4 kids in there. But then the corrupt prosecutor room,
there's
like 40 kids packed in there. Like, I want to be a
sardines in that room. I want to be a corrupt prosecutor.
How do I get there? What do I do?
Well, first you start with taking bribes as the hall monitor.
The corrupt hall monitor. That's where it begins.
Start with
and
unfortunately, I think that you didn't start there, so you didn't quite get to that. You had to settle for mental health counseling.
You have to look at the corrupt occupations early in life and start bringing them in.
There's a reputation thing to be had with that. You gotta start young, build that reputation of corruption. It doesn't just happen one day. You don't just be like, I'm corrupt.
You really have to work at something if you want to achieve it.
10,000 hours, right?
That's right.
To achieve expertise.
So this case, Noura Jackson. So this is Noura spelled Noura, which I think is a little unusual.
Which threw me for a loop when I was initially starting to search and research this.
I've never met anybody with Noura spelled like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking and I'm like, I want to make sure this isn't pronounced in some weird way that I'm missing, but it is actually just Noura.
Is it pronounced Noura? I don't know. I have no. It's pronounced Noura. We're pretty sure about that.
Yeah, and Jackson's pretty straightforward, so it's a name that we can probably almost pronounce correctly.
Almost.
We'll still get comments that we're mispronouncing it wrong.
I don't hear the U.
Noura.
So this is another one of those cases that kind of at its face, like when you first hear about the basic facts of it, spoiler alert, a murder will take place.
Somebody gets murdered.
You think, all right, this is just another ordinary, run-of-the-mill, stabby case, and a single homicide, not like a multiple homicide, not a serial killer.
Yeah, so boring.
Right, just a
regular run-of-the-mill single murder.
just an ordinary crime that happens
You
every
see
day.
all the time.
But then as you start going through this case, it's one revelation after the other that's just hard to even believe is real. And I think another one of these cases that kind of shows us that there's bad people on both sides of the criminal justice equation. It's not good guys and bad guys. It's degree of bad guys. Like we saw in Michael Morton case and perhaps in Jeff Pelley as well, although I don't think there was an allegation in that case of corrupt prosecutors, maybe just ones that weren't very good at their jobs.
Focused in on somebody early on.
Yeah, investigators who focus too quickly. And I see a lot of that in this case too. Prosecutors or investigators who are just like, yeah, we know who did it from the door, like they walked in. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, it's curious that would be something that people like the investigators are driven to. Because the word investigator, I think, really by definition should mean somebody who comes in really curious. Like, I want to figure this out. It's a puzzle, and puzzles aren't fun if there's just like three pieces. Like, oh, I got it.
I got a 3-piece puzzle. Let's take 2 seconds to put that together.
Yeah, I think you would think that they would enjoy the experience of adhering to a process and coming to a conclusion that's based on the evidence and logic put together. But instead, it's like they're pressured to just close the case.
Get right to the conclusion.
Yeah, even though they know the trial is going to take years. So it's not like they're going to rush and say, oh, well, Noura did it or whoever did it, and then the prosecution is going to take like 2 weeks. It takes years after the police are done. So, and really sometimes they're not even done like during the trial. They're still going out and trying to pick up things, although usually you would hope they're
like we we'll talk about with this, that things were introduced after after the conviction was already made.
Yeah. Well, there was some evidence that came in halfway through the trial that conveniently was misplaced, and we'll get to that.
Right.
And, hence now I don't know if these prosecutors were corrupt, but they certainly weren't good at what they did.
Yeah, no, they weren't.
So let's take a look at the background here. I don't really have much in the way of background for Noura. Some of it comes out during the trial.
Right.
But she was born March 17, 1987. In 2005, when all the excitement took place, she was 18. Her mother was 39, so both quite young. Her mother's name was Jennifer Jackson. She was an investment banker. She had divorced Jackson's father when Jackson was a baby, and he was some type of military official in the Lebanese army.
He had been, yeah.
Had been, yeah.
That was one of the reasons why they divorced, I believe, was the separation.
Yeah, so...
Because he was overseas in Lebanon.
But in the United States, he had several businesses.
Yeah.
One of which was the gas station named after Noura.
He had a gas station and convenience store that he owned. And what's interesting about what's tragic and sad about that is he was murdered.
At that gas
station. Off camera, nobody was they weren't able to capture anything. That murder is actually still unsolved. Investigators are not able to determine pretty much anything in that case. And then 15 months later, we get to June.
Right, we get to June 5, 2005. And this case, like so many, starts with an over-scrutinized 911 call. I mean, if anybody watched like 48 Hours and 2020 and all these shows, they would be petrified to make a 911 call. It's like, police, fire, and ambulance. May I please have the police? That is not admission of guilt. I would just like to talk to them.
You're saying it too nice. You're probably guilty.
It's like, did you listen to that 911 call? It was so calm. It's really weird. It must have been the guy who did it.
I have found somebody deceased. I am very upset about it.
Not upset enough, though.
They're not upset enough.
Or too upset. If you're saying you're upset, then you're a fraud. Like you can't win on the 911 call.
We're trying to figure out behavior. We've talked about this a ton of times now. Trying to figure out the behavior and attributing guilt or innocence to behavior.
Yeah, look at, you think about, there's a Simpsons I like, pretty much all of them. But there's one episode.
Every episode.
There's one episode with one of my favorite characters that came on, Kelsey Grammer, who played Sideshow Bob.
Sideshow Bob.
And I don't remember the episode. It's an older one where I think it actually happened in a few different episodes where he would step on rakes. It's like, whack. I've been there, right? I felt like Sideshow Bob at times. You're like, everything you do, boom, it's another rake in the face.
I think that one was that the Simpsons went into federal witness protection against Bob.
That's right. On the boat.
Yeah,
The boat.
The boat was there, and he tied himself underneath the U-Haul, and then they drove through the cactus field.
U-Haul, yeah, that's right.
Drove through a cactus field just because Homer wanted to.
Yeah, spontaneously.
It'll be faster.
So you think, like, when you think about 911 calls that are Sideshow Bob stepping on rakes, I think of Darlie Rotier or whatever, however you pronounce that name, where, like, during the call, she's like, yeah, I think my fingerprint or something is on the knife or something like that. She just kept, like, it's like making it worse.
Here's a shovel. Dig yourself a little bit deeper.
Now, this one, I don't think this one was as bad, but this occurred at 5 a.m. on June 5, 2005. Noura called 911 and said she needed an ambulance right now. Someone broke into my house. My mom is bleeding. She's not breathing. She repeated some of those phrases. When the police arrived, they found that she was correct. Jennifer Jackson was not breathing. She was dead on the floor of her bedroom with a wicker basket over her head.
Yeah.
So right away, they're thinking, Noura did it.
Yeah, right away. They're like, this is a rage killing. She was stabbed a bunch of times. And a wicker basket over her head? I've seen this kind of thing before.
Yeah, 50. It was 50 times. And I believe on the 911 call, the operator also asked her something about...
It's like, I really want to know how many times the investigators have seen murders with wicker baskets over their heads. That seems like an odd fact for people to do. How often does that happen?
Yeah, did they really walk in there and say, not another one?
Another wicker basket case. Damn it.
Well, often enough, I guess, for people to pick up the pattern of maybe the killer knew this person and couldn't stand to see
shame.
their face, shame,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. But maybe not with a wicker basket all the time. But
See, that's the problem. Like it could be a towel, it could be something else. Like I would expect that, but they're just like wicker basket. Daughter did it.
maybe she was a collector.
I don't know. Did she have a collection of wicker baskets?
She could have. It could have happened.
She could have.
Yeah, it seems... It's one of those things that, a stranger killing, if they wanted to try to get away with the crime, they would definitely put something over the face, because that's one of those well-known kind of things you see on, like, Law and Order, or again, like the news shows, like 48 Hours, where towel, pillow, blanket, plastic bag, wicker basket, whatever.
Right. If you've watched any of those true crime shows, only people who are close to the victim put something over their face. So if I want to get away with this and frame somebody who's close to them, I'll put a wicker basket over her head.
This reminds me, I don't know if it was Naked Gun or the show that it came from, Police Squad. They talk about an all-night wicker joint in one of it's either the show or the movie, I forget what. And I say that all the time because, people say like an all-night liquor joint or something like that. And they say, oh yeah, the all-night wicker joint.
The old wordplay.
It's my favorite thing to say.
I think there was only 6 episodes of Police Squad, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, I was pretty young when that came out, but I remember watching that, and there was a guy, his shoes were walking across the screen, right? And I was with a bunch of people watching it, a bunch of kids, because I was a kid, and the nameplate of the person that he was going to see was visible, like where the shoes were, and no one else got it. I'm looking around like, the nameplate's right. And I realized that's the difference with dark humor and subtle humor. That's why some people don't get Airplane, Simpsons, Naked Gun, because they can't go that next level,
right?
And catch what
they're not looking at the background or the other auxiliary stuff. Yeah.
So to them, like I've watched The Simpsons with people before, where they're like, is this ever going to end? Is this all he does? Like, wow. It's like listening to a symphony and being like, this is just noise. Like, but there are people like it might as well like just be a white screen. Like they don't get they literally just don't get it.
Right.
Like The Simpsons is one of those shows that, especially as it's gone on through the years, it's got so much smart humor mixed in with the really dumb humor that it's just like every once in a while you catch a really great nugget of just super intelligent humor. Like one episode, Lisa made it a perpetual motion machine.
Right.
And they're like, he and Marge are in bed and just talking about it. And she's like, this perpetual motion machine she made it's crap. And she's like, we need to do something about it. You're right, Lisa. In this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics. It's like, that's such a smart joke.
Yeah, the Simpsons is just, all 22 minutes or whatever the episodes are just so well written. They think about every moment.
Yeah.
There's nothing lazy about their humor. It's just, yeah. But, I've learned that, again, the TV might as well be off for some people. And The Naked Gun is where I figured it out for the first time. When like half the joke, actually almost all the jokes, no one got.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it died after 6 episodes. But it was hysterical.
It went on to make 3 movies out of it, though.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it stopped at 6.
33 in the third movie.
You're right. Maybe that's
We
why.
just don't know about the other ones. Just kind of
They
like
were lost.
Leonard Part 6. We don't know about the other 5.
So back to Noura Jackson, on the call as well, I think she said something, the dispatcher said something like, was she shot? And Noura said no.
Right.
So again, the police are like, well, she must have done it.
Well, she knows she wasn't shot. How does she know that?
There were some other clues in the house, right? We see this I love this explanation of the thing with the door, because this is a kind of a very subtle situation with this very complex door.
It's a very complicated door.
It really
It's a very complicated door.
a lot of parts to it. So here's the Cliff Notes version, because I think you could write a report just about this door. There was broken glass found on the kitchen floor, and this, it came from a door that separated the garage from the kitchen.
Kitchen, yeah.
Right.
It's like there's garage, door, kitchen.
And the doors in the garage were locked.
Yeah. The garage door was down and locked, supposedly.
So no one could even get into the garage, or if they did, they didn't leave any evidence of their arrival. And yet we see the broken glass on the kitchen floor. Now, that kind of makes sense. The broken glass on the kitchen floor, if you're in the garage, you punch through the glass. But the problem is this door had 3 horizontal panels, so running this way. So I picture like the doorknob being here, and then these 3 panels.
Yeah, the 3 panes of glass.
Yeah, and the middle panel was broken. So right away they're like, inside job, because you would break out the lower one if you wanted to unlock the door. But then they found a top secret lock that was off to the side. It's a hinge lock. And then they're like, oh, this was an inside job. Right, the same thing they said before.
You had to have known about the hinge lock in order to be able to know that. And okay.
Yeah, so you think about it. So if it was the lower panel, inside job. It's the middle panel. Oh, that's an inside job. If it was the top
upper panel, it would have been like, this person's really tall. Who do we know lives in this house is really tall?
Well, not Noura. She must have done it. She got a step stool. That's
Got a
what
step
it was.
stool.
Yeah.
But the thing was, the funny part was they even said that the glass was on the wrong side of the door. Like they said, like if it had been broken out, the glass should have been in the garage for some reason.
That doesn't make any sense.
And it doesn't make sense to me either. Like if you were in the garage trying to get in, you punch the glass or break the glass and it would go inside.
Maybe some would fall a little, but yeah, most of it would be inside, I would think. That's how it works.
Now, it was from the pictures I've seen, it was a circle. Like somebody had cut a circle in this glass as opposed to just breaking it through. And I don't know of anybody. I mean, I'm sure there are people that have glass tools like that, but I don't know of anybody that has that kind of stuff. That's pretty specific.
Sounds like an inside job.
It's an inside job.
Search for Noura. She's got to have one sitting around. Maybe there's one in her pocket.
Look around for that glass cutter.
But somebody came knowing that they were going to do that and prepared to do something like that. I thought that was probably one of the best details about it. That it wasn't necessarily just the average person. It was somebody who came prepared to do that and had the knowledge to do that and the effort.
Somebody who'd seen the glass, somebody who knew where the lock was, and somebody who was afraid that the occupant of the home would be awakened by the shattering of the glass.
Potentially. Yeah, I don't know.
What
You gonna say
movie
something,
was it?
Mike?
I'm trying to remember the movie. There was a movie. They're trying to break into a place, and they've got the suction cup glass cutter, and they put it up and they make the circle. And as soon as they make the circle, the rest of the glass outside shatters, falls down, and just like
Yeah, I don't
holding
remember
this
either.
circle of glass. You remember the scene?
I remember
though.
seeing that.
I cannot remember
Yeah.
the movie. It'll hit me sometime.
Well,
later
somebody will
tonight.
tell us in the comments.
Yeah, somebody will tell us in the comment. It'll hit me later, though.
Yeah, I remember that, but I don't remember the movie.
Like at some point during this podcast, I'll be like, it was this movie.
So we see that none of the neighbors saw an intruder, and then investigators talked to Noura Jackson's on-again, off-again boyfriend.
Wait a minute. The Methodist minister?
Yes, he did happen to be a
Took my
Methodist.
job.
He had your dream. It was your life dream. He had your life
guy.
dream.
Lucky guy. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So we see this very complex narrative. So this case has a lot of numbers, a lot of times, a lot of text messages, a lot of phone calls. At this time, this person texted this person. At that time, they called the other person, but they didn't answer. All this, like, this must have been a nightmare of cell phone records. So again, kind of long story, very short. The boyfriend said he called her at midnight on the night that her mother was murdered. He told the police that he hung up before she answered. So he tried to reach her, and he hung up. After this, he went to sleep in his house, which was 90 minutes away from, this was in Memphis, Tennessee?
Yep.
Yeah, 90 minutes away from Memphis, Tennessee. Jackson said that she discovered her mother's body after coming home from being out all night. So this is something that I think, may have resulted in her getting convicted, right? She gives a story, but she leaves out a key detail, right? So she said that she went to various parties, drove around alone, which is never good, stopped to get gas, and at Taco Bell. So she was already living dangerously.
Taking her chances.
Taking your life in your hands on that one.
Risk taker.
I love taking my life into my hands at Taco Bell. But if we learned anything from Scott Peterson, if you stop at a gas station, they're going to find out. And if you don't have a receipt from that gas station, you must have done it.
Yeah,
And if
she,
you do,
but
you
if
must
you
have done
do,
it.
you must have done it.
Yeah.
she retained all her receipts, which they used against her.
Right.
But there was one stop that she did not mention during the initial interview. Mm-hmm. And that was, and I think this is really what convicted her. I think it all comes down to this. She failed to mention that she stopped at a Walgreens at 4:10 a.m., I think it was, and she bought first aid tape and liquid bandages. She put them in their car. That's where the police found them,
But she didn't have a receipt for that.
which seems weird,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
On her left hand, she had, I guess, some of the tape. And presumably, what is liquid bandage? Is that like goo that you put on?
It hardens up. It's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of like
essentially like super glue.
it hardens up. It's kind of like a bandage you could put on to make any size, I suppose, any place.
Interesting fact. Cyanoacrylate, which is what superglue is, was actually initially developed during the Korean conflict to be liquid sutures for use in the field, so that medics could be able to just suture things shut real quick by pouring this liquid over top of it, because it adheres to skin very, very rapidly.
I think you can do that to some extent, but not for like...
Yeah, it wasn't used very much because it doesn't work when the wound is bloody.
Right.
Because it's also water soluble. But that's why it was invented. And then we're like, hey, we can use this to like glue models together, and then
fact,
sniff it. Like,
Right, well, yeah, that was other usage that came up.
looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Steve McCroskey. So she had this stuff on her hand. Now, so this is interesting because 4:10 a.m. would be almost an hour before she called 911. Mm-hmm. So you're treating a cut on your hand, of all places, after or right before calling 911 about a person who was stabbed 50 times. And of course, stabbing murders are notorious for cuts on somebody's hand.
Yeah, whether from defensive wounds or
Overrunning
from
the blade.
knife. Yeah, right. Which they talked about, both of them as a possibility. Noura would say that she excluded this detail because at that point, at some point during that, she started to realize, wait a minute, they think I'm a suspect. But, she told about the gas. She told about Taco Bell. But for some reason, this was on her mind is, oh, they think I'm a suspect. I shouldn't tell them this. She wasn't, I'm sure, thinking about it pretty consciously. But they would say, investigators would say that the murder probably happened sometime between 1 and 3 a.m. So, 4:10 a.m., potentially an hour after the murder, if their timeline is correct. And she had gotten a paper towel from the clerk at the Walgreens. And on the video, it showed her kind of putting on her hand. So presumably it was an active cut. It was actively bleeding. So that would say that it was probably pretty fresh, that she couldn't even wait to open the stuff she just bought. I want something now. I need something now. So that was pretty telling as well.
Yeah, especially with her story. Her story had been cut before.
Yeah, she had supposedly several different stories on it. Now, Noura says she only had the one story.
The beer bottle, right?
That they were at an Italian festival the night before, and that she'd been intoxicated and slipped and fell and smashed her hand against some broken beer bottles. And the investigators are like, well, how does that work? How do you smash your hand, the back of your hand against broken beer bottles? I'm like, if you're drunk, you're not coordinated enough to catch yourself very often. That's why there's a lot of broken noses amongst people who are, super intoxicated, because they'll fall down and just and not be able to catch themselves. So if she fell down like sideways, her hand easily could have hit a bottle. But some of her other friends and family members and acquaintances said that she told them, like two of them said at the trial that she told them that she got it trying to get her cat out of the garage, that she had gotten the scratch there. And a couple of their family members said that she told them that it was actually a burn, that she burned herself on a pot making mac and cheese. So, I mean, so it sounds like she has a bunch of different stories for where this wound came from.
Macaroni and cheese is a dangerous activity.
It is.
I'm sure the number of hospitalizations for it are just...
You have to be incredibly careful with mac and cheese.
Yeah, going up and up each year. Skyrocketing, right?
I am a pro when it comes to making mac and cheese, so I know the dangers all too well.
Have you ever burned yourself?
Yes,
okay.
I have. Never enough to go to a hospital, but, manly man doesn't go to hospital.
Do you go to Walgreens, though? That's the big question.
No, I never go to Walgreens. I go to Rite Aid.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, no matter, what excuse she's going with, burn or beer bottle cut or cat attack, why it would be bleeding right before she called 911. That really hurts.
If it's deep enough, if you didn't take care of it 24 hours before, it could reopen very easily.
Yeah, she could have reopened it. Yeah,
and
driving around alone, or maybe one of the tacos attacked her.
Yeah. It could be just, well, this is itchy. Oh crap! Now it's bleeding. I've done that. I think a lot of people have done that, because healing wounds itch.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that she didn't do it, but I don't know. Most of the time when investigators talk about a wound to hand involved in a stabbing death, they talk about it being to the palm, right? So it's like, because if you're holding the knife and you stab and the knife hits and goes backwards in your hand, it cuts the palm of your hand.
Can you demonstrate with an oversized novelty tech?
I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to use that.
It's pretty dangerous.
It's really dangerous.
It doesn't really stand on its own there, does it?
That's the dangerous part. It could fall on anybody at any time.
Yeah. Well, those are super dangerous. No, but Noura's the cut on her hand was actually on the back of her hand. Right. So I'm like, I think one of the investigators at one point was asked something similar about why it was on the back of her hand. I think they said that it came when she broke the glass in the kitchen. But there's no evidence of blood on any of the glass in the kitchen.
Maybe she picked up the pieces that were affected. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. But that's another thing that she would have had to do in that hour. One of the big things was I imagine if you stab someone 50 times, fairly close contact, a lot of blood everywhere, and there was a lot of blood everywhere.
Right, all over the room.
I don't imagine you would be able to get away with that, with not getting bloody and not having bloody clothes.
Yeah. Or at least traces of blood, at the very least.
Noura didn't have any blood on her.
But she could have showered. They found
she could have showered.
Water in the shower.
One of the investigators did say there was water in the shower, but at At the trial, one of the crime scene techs said they used techniques to try and detect blood in the shower, and there was no blood in the shower or in the sink. There was some traces of blood on the tile just inside the door, but there was no trace of blood in the shower. So if she showered, she would have had to then bleach down the whole shower.
Which she may have.
She may have. But from everything that has been going on with Noura to this point, she was 18 years old, still in the 11th grade, because she kept getting kicked out of high schools and went, around from school to school until she finally was doing homeschooling stuff. There was a big argument happened a week beforehand between her mother and her, where her mother was like, "You're still in the 11th grade. You're 18 years old. You haven't passed the homeschooling tests. It's either go to boarding school or get out." And that was one of the things they pointed to as being this major thing. Now, maybe she was a criminal genius like Jeff Pelly. Right? She kept a diary of everything she was going to need to do in order to try and get away with this. But then still didn't hide the cut on her hand well enough.
Yeah. Well, it could have been accomplices. We'll talk about some of the theories, but, she could have just been the mastermind of it and a love interest. She had a few of them. If you want to call it that, like, I guess, physical relationship people, friends with benefits.
Friends with benefits is what one of them referred to it as.
Well, Mike, you bring up good points about her behavior. That's a large part of what they are referencing in this case and at the trials. Her behavior, not only the oppositional behavior, like things that would have gotten her in trouble at school, but also drug habits and alcohol, and going against what her mom wanted her to do, things like that. So that's a pretty big part here. She talked about how she had done, she drank alcohol, used marijuana, and she said, among other things.
Among other things.
And I don't know what those among other things are. I don't know if you guys heard any other, but I was very curious about that.
Have you? Quite a bit about that in the appeals paperwork and through the trial stuff. Right. A lot of her friends talked about what happened the night before. And many of them said that she had taken, one of them specifically said they saw how many, but they said that she'd taken some Lortabs.
Oh, that's right.
Which is the hydrocodone acetaminophen, Vicodin, is another name brand for it. And that's a heavy-duty opioid. If she took 3 of those, she was high as a kite.
Yeah, her character was really helped the prosecution. Right. I think the cut wasn't there. That would have been a big thing for her, or if her behavior had been more in line with society's norms. I think she could have overcome the cut as just, it's an aberration, it's an anomaly. It happened, doesn't necessarily mean she's a killer. After all, she didn't have any DNA, blood on her, other bruises, cuts, just the one cut.
The focus on the behavior and drug use and all that was something that her attorneys would reference as to why they, maybe not why they wanted a retrial, but why there was misconduct in the trial that she experienced. And
it was also grounds for an appeal, and I think it was struck from we'll get to that, but they weren't allowed to use it.
It's kind of prejudicial.
Yeah.
Ever since Nancy Reagan in the early 80s
came with drugs.
Nixon coined the war on drugs.
Oh, no, just say no.
Nancy Reagan was the just say no, and which spawned into the DARE program, which didn't work at all. There's scientific evidence shows it had no impact on whether or not people did drugs or not.
And a lot of people invested in DARE. Remember the stickers?
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Oh, I went through DARE when I was in school. I thought it was the stupidest thing, but it got us out of class. Like, it got us out of doing actual schoolwork, so that was great. We had a police officer come into the class, so that was pretty cool. Like, really? And he burns synthetic marijuana in front of us, like, this is so you know what it smells like. It's like, this, like, really? But the whole premise of that age, especially the late 80s.
Don't settle 90s. For an inferior substitute.
Right. This is so you know what it smells like. This is what synthetic weed smells like. Get the real thing. But the whole outcome of that entire, from the early 80s through to the mid to late 90s was this whole indoctrination of the country into drugs are bad. drugs are bad. And we know the transitive property, right? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? So if the transitive property of drugs, as I call it, is if drugs are bad and I do drugs, I must be bad. And like people bought into that. And so now it's like, oh, all drug users are bad.
Yeah, and juries pretty much always believe that.
Yeah.
And must have committed a murder.
I think it's one of the easiest sells for, well, there's two easy sells for a prosecutor. Anything to do with sexual deviance. Doesn't even matter what it is, consensual, whatever. Boom. That's it. Pervert.
Lock them up.
And drug use, especially heroin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they'll also take methamphetamine, cocaine, whatever, crack cocaine.
Which again, apparently, Noura was doing cocaine. Several of her friends said that they'd witnessed, or her boyfriend, Perry Brosfield, he said that he'd done cocaine with her dozens of times.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes the prosecutor's job very easy.
Lots of mixing of substances. Like we're going to drink and do weed and snort some coke all at the same time. It doesn't do that much for you. You're taking central nervous center depressant, a hallucinogen, and a stimulant all at the same time. Brain's just going to be like, I don't know what to do.
Well, probably what they were going for.
They certainly take risks. And we see the same thing with like prescription medication, where young people will raid a medicine cabinet of their parents or whatever, and they'll pick all these drugs with no idea what they do. Some of them aren't even like won't make you high.
It's like, no, this is a blood thinner. like, why are you taking a blood thinner? It's a pill.
Yeah, and they'll put all the pills, in one bottle or whatever, and they'll just take them like
grab
Skittles.
bag.
Yeah.
No, you don't eat Skittles that way. You're supposed to one at a time. One at a time.
Yeah.
Or like a bunch of the same color at the same time.
You match them up. Yeah, of course.
Green Skittles are the best.
So let's move to the prosecutor. So the prosecutor plays a key part. This is a relatively young prosecutor, 40 years old, right? So fairly early to mid-career for a prosecutor. Usually they go on pretty long because there's no heavy lifting, right? So not unusual for...
Right, they have all the ADAs to do all of the stuff for them.
Right. Yeah, and it's not a physically demanding job. Like you can have a good long career life. You can work it up into your 70s or however long you want. Her name is Amy Wyrick, right? So she was definitely motivated. She was a career, like she wanted to be a district attorney at some point. So she created a theory, and the theory was pretty straightforward. Noura was upset because she was rebellious. She was rebelling against her mother. She murdered her mother to steal money. She wanted to take that money and continue her party lifestyle. It seems like kind of a weak motive, but Amy Wyrick thought it was terrific.
Yeah.
And, I think the part that I struggle with is just the statistics of it. Daughters don't murder their mothers.
Right. Like matricide is like 1% of all murders, and then daughters being the culprits of matricide is like 1% of that.
I think it's something like 4% of all parricides. Now that's both sides. Like a parricide would be like a double parricide would be mother and father. But I think in parricides it's 4%. I don't know what it is for a single, like a matricide, but it could be 1. It's small. Like it's so small that has to really occur to you. Like it's probably a male. Like if you're going to say it's matricide, it's probably a son that did it, or more likely it was not a matricide. It was an outsider.
Right.
But she went right to 18-year-old daughter killing 39-year-old mother, which is, could be. We'll talk about it.
It's possible. But I think that she went with that because the investigators locked onto her immediately. And I think that one of the major reasons that they locked onto her was because of her clothing, what she was wearing, which wasn't like a really promiscuous outfit. It was, it's June in Memphis. She was wearing a long-sleeved hoodie. Right?
Yeah.
They described it as unusually hot.
Yeah. So it was like 96 degrees at 6 o'clock in the morning. Something like that, like super hot, and she's wearing a long sleeve shirt.
Which she said that she would normally wear, even on the beach.
Yeah.
But other people would say...
And there are some pictures of her from different time periods, all wearing long sleeve shirts in different environments. So
other people would say that she usually dresses fashionably, and that was they felt that was kind of uncommon for her. Some mixed stories on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was alarming, even though she didn't have injuries except for the one cut.
Yeah.
So,
but the investigators said that, she was using the long sleeve to try and hide that cut. There are a lot better ways to try and hide a cut than wearing long sleeves.
yeah, well, and also if the medical supplies or whatever were on the seat of her car or in her car.
That's actually an interesting one, too, because there were two different accounts on that in the trial paper, in the appeals paperwork. One of the crime scene techs said that they were involved in investigating the car, said that the Walgreens bag with all of the medical stuff in it was buried underneath clothing in the back of the Jeep. She had Jeep Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
And the primary investigator said that when he walked past, it was in plain sight. He looked through the rear window and saw it in plain sight in the back of the car. Which one is it?
Mm-hmm. It's an important distinction, especially in a case that's not very good. Like, they need every little bit they can get. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was the theory. This was a matricide, and initially, I think they believed she worked alone. So she was the one with the knife. Again, only one cut on the hand seems unusual for 50 stab wounds, although one of the first stabs could have incapacitated the mother, and the rest could have been just out of rage.
It's actually nice. The medical examiner said she had wounds on her hands, which were defensive wounds, so it wouldn't have been the first one. She would have been fighting
at least somewhat
for a little bit before she would have been incapacitated.
Yeah.
Now, they also talked about this manicure that Noura had. She had gotten the day before. She had gotten the day, so that was the 5th, so she had gotten it on the 4th. And they said the manicure was perfect. None of the nails had broken. There was no damage to the nails. They said there was no blood, of course, or skin or anything underneath of the nails. So that would be an indication to the defense that she hadn't done anything wrong. If she had been involved, actually done the stabbing, perhaps they would have been broken. Perhaps there would have been blood or skin or something underneath of her nails, but they didn't find anything.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very difficult to in just an hour clean up enough of the crime scene to take away a lot of the evidence and take a shower and get under each and every nail
and keep that on there that well.
And keep all of it, keep them all on there.
Especially with using potentially chemicals.
The French manicure, which apparently just has white on the ends of it, like it's colored and then has white on the tips.
Right.
So she had a French manicure. She'd showed to other people. One of her friends testified at the trial that Noura showed her the manicure, but she didn't see a cut on the back of her hand when she showed her the manicure. But that's as simple as like, oh, look, I have this manicure. Here, take a look, and the cut's on this hand. Mm-hmm. So
sure,
it could have been as simple as that. Of course, all of her friends also admitted they were all using drugs or drinking at the time.
Another friend would say that she held Noura's hands and doesn't remember any kind of bandage or anything on her hand that would indicate any kind of cut. So there's definitely a lot to it. Not really sure what the truth is with this, but there's certainly a lot of things that indicate, maybe Noura was part of this, just for a lot of different stories and things that she would change too.
Yeah. Yeah, so, already we see kind of a murky picture, definitely not a clear-cut case. Then you get the whole thing coming in with the father again. Amy Wyrick picked up on this. Jackson renewed her relationship with her father when she was 16. So again, he was out of the picture when she was an infant. Mm-hmm. He owned that convenience store and some other businesses in Memphis. Again, he was killed at that location. Jackson inherited a couple of vehicles from her father that she wanted to sell, and her mother wouldn't let her sell them. And her mother also collected Jackson's father's personal effects, which that becomes important later on. So we also see that Jennifer Jackson, her estate was worth $1.5 million. Mm-hmm. And there were many parties interested in that estate, including a half-uncle, which apparently is a real thing. Half-uncle.
I've never heard of a half-uncle.
Yeah, apparently. When I was first researching this, I'm like, half-uncle, I've never heard that, but I looked
Jennifer's
it up.
half-brother?
I don't know what it is.
I think that's
a real
that
thing.
Might be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh.
So a half-uncle and 2 aunts were all in a legal situation, like a lawsuit to get that estate. And they testified against her.
Yeah, at least 2 did. That Noura was asking, prior to the murder, Noura was asking how much the estate was worth and what she would get in the event of her mother's death. So that certainly didn't look good for Noura.
Yeah, the prosecutors made a big deal about that, but I think her half uncle, her mother's brother, said that the conversation kind of came up organically. And Jennifer was the one who brought up the estate value and the value of the cars and all those things. And Noura said, well, how much do I get out of that? And Jennifer was like, no, nothing right now. And she's like, I'm going to sell the cars. Like, no, those cars were my dad's. They belong to me. Like if we're going to get money from them, I get that money. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like a back and forth. Because there was a lot of arguments apparently that weekend. It was Memorial Day weekend, the weekend before. There's a lot of arguments going on there about that money, about the party that happened at the house while they were in Florida, as they were visiting one of Jennifer's other sisters in Florida on Memorial Day weekend, both Jennifer and Noura. And they had a phone call from the police saying, there's a really loud party going on at your house. Yeah. And Jennifer was like, you want to explain this, Noura? And Nora's like, I'm here. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. But that sparked a big conflict between them that weekend.
Mm-hmm. I think if you really look at all the evidence, and we'll talk about some more of it here, but if you look at the theory that Noura didn't get along with her mother, after this whole thing's over, she said that when she was in court, it was unbearable, not a quote, but like implied, it was unbearable to watch all these people saying that she didn't get along with her mother and that she was rebellious and that she was a drug user and all this stuff. I'm pretty sure Noura was a drug user, was rebellious, and did not get along with her mother. I mean, all those people couldn't have been lying.
I'm pretty sure that she admitted to all three of those facts at various times.
And how could that be a struggle to see people I guess really impugning her character or whatever?
And I think that, again, goes back to that now ingrained mistrust and dislike of drug addicts. Mm-hmm. Because, when we label somebody as a drug addict, they're automatically a bad person. And so she's like, my character's being dragged through the mud. Like, I'm a good person. I want to be a good person. And yeah, I've used some drugs in the past, but they're trying to make me out to be this drug addict. And it's like, you kind of are.
Yeah, she was... It seems like she had a drug use problem of some type.
I'm pretty sure she had a substance use issue.
It's something that comes up repeatedly.
She argued with her mother.
Yeah, in jail, it actually comes up again. Like, where you're not supposed to have drugs. But
yeah, but
I know. Yeah, but you're not supposed.
Not supposed to.
There's a sign on the wall.
It's like it just said, "Don't do drugs." DARE program.
We really get mad if you bring drugs in here.
Except for the guards who are the ones bringing the drugs in. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm sure you guys talk to clients about a lot is accepting things about themselves, conditions they may have or personality traits or, whatever it might be, drug use. And that kind of that acceptance is often a first step for many people, accepting this is who I am, how I am, things I do. And then, of course, you can go on to work to change it. So Noura might not have been to that point yet because, she was still arguing very heavily with her mom about this school stuff and, of course, her behavior and drug use. And so Noura might not have been to that stage yet where she accepted it or realized it. So then to hear it from other people in a very intense way in a court hearing was probably a pretty big shock to her. And she probably had this image of herself that, she's fine. She, whatever, she's fine. Just like all teenagers do. I'm fine. Whatever, I'll figure it out. And so then have that happen to her, I'm sure it was a pretty big shock that caused her to really consider, who's really in my corner, especially with family members not supporting her any longer when they were in the beginning, and yeah, she was, but she played a part in that though too, giving different stories and not being forthright with a lot of people. So it was probably a pretty tough process for her to come to terms with a lot of her own behavior and just the way that she was.
And you talk about talking to our clients about acceptance and things. I've worked with a lot of substance use stuff. When I first started grad school, I met with Dr. Walsh. He was my academic advisor. And he asked me, what population do you want to work with? And I had no idea. I had no idea. I blanked. I was
The
like,
ones that'll pay me?
right. I was like, I haven't thought about it. Like, I have my bachelor's degree and that's it. Like, how did I even get in this program? Right. And then I was like, I don't know anything but drug use. Like, I don't think I could work with addicts. I'm really, because I fell for the indoctrination. I was like, drug people are bad people. And I blame you. Because when it came to internship, you're like, hey, you're doing your internship at Eagleville, like, which is a substance use treatment hospital. It's a 90-day substance use rehab. And I was like, do I have to? We were doing research up there. So you're like, no, you can do it wherever you want. But you got to drive up there an hour and a half to get the research data. So you might as well. It's a long trip.
Yeah.
So I ended up working there, doing my internship there. And I fell in love with it. Fell in love with doing substance use treatment. And right afterwards, I took a job working in another rehab. Spent a few years working in drug and alcohol treatment. And one of the things I did there was utilizing narrative therapy, was help people to externalize the addiction, make it not part of who they are, which kind of flies in the face of AA. So AA is, first step of AA is admit that you're an addict.
Right.
And that you're powerless over your addiction. Well, externalization and narrative therapy says addiction is this thing outside of you. It's not who you are. It's not a trait of who you are. It's not something that defines you. It's something that impacts your behaviors. It's something that has control over you, yes, but you can learn to manage that. And like one of the greatest things I ever did, and there was use that activity, and we talked about, my clients and I talked about it as if it was a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie character. Mm-hmm. We're like, all right, addiction is the next villain in the next MCU movie. What does it look like? What powers does it have? And we got a lot of good stuff out of that. Mm-hmm. I actually published that activity in a book on superheroes in therapy. It's a great chapter. It's the only one actually on using anything with superheroes with adults, as everything else is with kids in that book. But yeah, externalize it, take it outside of the self, make it not about who you are, because then we can accept us as a person. Say, I'm not a bad person. I've just got this supervillain trying to make me do things. And it doesn't dismiss the blame for any actions you've taken against other people. It doesn't dismiss the responsibility you have for managing your disease or anything. It just says you're not a bad person, which I think is great, which helps with that acceptance, as you're talking about. And you're right. I think Noura wasn't at that part. Yeah. I don't think she's at that part now.
That's a fair point. That's a good point there, Mike. We do similar things with OCD treatment, with the obsessions, and people come in with intrusive thoughts and like, it must be true about who I am. And, you got to work, it's this line between, you have thoughts, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're thinking about these thoughts or that you are actively engaged in these thoughts, that you want these thoughts, And of course, we're not trying to give reassurance for any of these things, but it's like I'm sure with many things, but it's this constant battle in somebody's mind of there's a part of me that I don't like, but I feel like it makes me do things like drink, do drugs, certain behaviors, think certain ways, whatever. I feel like it makes me do these things, but that whole process of, wait a minute, it may be part of you. It may be a driving force, and you may feel like a driving force, but it doesn't mean that you have to listen to that driving force. It doesn't mean that you have to think of that as who you are. It means that there's something, and we have to work to understand that something and what you're going to do about that something. So interesting points, Mike. Yeah. Very applicable.
Yeah. The identity is very important in substance use. And for many years, like therapeutic community, right? Many years it was about blaming. Like the TC model is you're bad for being addicted to a substance, right? And that has a long history, and a lot of clinicians still believe that and really act on that. It's also called the moral model.
which is a terrible way of treating anything.
Yeah, I think it makes people who aren't addicted feel good.
Right.
But
I'm a good person because I don't do drugs.
But
but you're really judgy right now.
But that's not the idea of therapy, right? Like to help the people who already are not sick, feel better. It seems, yeah. Also, I think with substance use, it is a population, a lot of clinicians don't want to get involved in, especially early career. Sometimes it's considered kind of a dead end. But when you work with people who have substance use problems, you realize that pretty much everybody has a addictive-like behavior in their life. Like it might not be substances, it might be gambling, it might be shopping, it might be sex, but everybody gets into these patterns where they overdo.
Reading books. It might be reading books or doing true crime podcasts.
That's right. It could be anything. It applies to everybody. Yeah. So I think the other thing with substance use is it's interesting because it can be easily quantified. Right? It's hard to quantify depression, anxiety. We try, but it's hard. But with substances, we can always say, well, how much did you use? When's the last time you used? Even though that doesn't necessarily tell us as much as you might think, it becomes kind of an area of the field where you can easily say, this is a lot of use. This is not a lot of use. I think that's what happened here with Noura is, by any standard, she was using a lot. Like there was no way to get around that. There was no way to say, here and there, a joint, a shot of vodka. No, this was like constant.
It's like, yeah, every once in a while I'll have a Vicodin and a shot of vodka and go to sleep, because it helps. But no, this was like pretty much constant. It was pretty much every day.
Yeah. This was just like a rocket without fins. Like she was out of control. So to frame it any other way, I just don't know where anyone would get that. Like I may or may not believe she did it. We'll talk about that. But she almost certainly was using a lot of substances. I don't know how you can escape that, seeing the evidence. So what we see that Jackson was arrested, charged with first-degree murder in September of 2005.
Yeah, 4 months later. Mm-hmm. Only 4 months later. She was living in an apartment that her aunts were paying for at that time. But she was still using drugs. Like her uncle at one point was helping move furniture after she'd been living there for a while and found like a straw with white powder on it and a couple of pills underneath the couch.
Yeah, interestingly, this couldn't have been too reassuring. She was completing a babysitting assignment when she was arrested. How would you like to be the parents of that child? Like
your babysitter was arrested. We have your baby.
But don't worry, it was just first-degree murder.
And she did a lot of drugs.
Right.
She may have been doing drugs around your baby and committing other murders. We don't know, but it's okay. It's fine. You're fine.
Yeah, I think those people probably had trust issues for a while, I would imagine, after that. Understandably so.
So when we're interviewing the next babysitter, hon, we got to make sure that they didn't commit a murder.
Let's use the expanded checklist. Have you recently committed a murder?
First question, are you associated with any murders? Second question, drugs.
So I remember years ago, I did a lot of consulting. I was, for a while, I was doing consulting around like loss prevention and other areas like sales and different things for retail. And we had these instruments. I had these instruments I used to resell, and I used to help people kind of administer them on their work population, their employees, and derive useful information from them. And I don't remember the name of the instrument, but there was this one instrument that was designed to qualify retail workers, like sales associates, cashiers, whoever, like in a store. Retail is pretty much dead now with Amazon and all that, but back then it was a big deal. You would go into a store and there'd be items on the shelf.
There were buildings that had
it was a physical building
in them,
yeah.
And you'd go in and you'd spend money.
And not just an Amazon warehouse.
Yeah, no, it wasn't just an Amazon warehouse. You actually had to interact with other people, which I'm personally glad that we have Amazon now.
Yeah, me too.
I interact with enough people in my day job. I don't want to interact with other people when I'm just trying to buy a burrito.
So anyway, this instrument, you think, all right, this is one of those lie detectors, and I'm always highly skeptical of any instrument that claims to detect a lie. But here's how they did it. I thought this was hysterical. I couldn't believe this actually worked for a lot of people. They would have questions about theft, and they would basically repeat the same question for like 40, 50 items. So it would be like, have you stolen anything today? Like multiple choice, right? So it was, or have you stolen anything? And the first one would be today, like today. The next item would be like in the last 10 days, in the last 20 days, like very small increments, right? And they would just keep going to like last year, and then it would be like, have you stolen from your employer, stolen from your parents, stolen from your friends? And then it would be like, how much have you stolen, right? Like $1, up to $1, up to $5, up to $10, up to $1,000, like just, it would be on and on and on. It was like 8, 9 different possible responses. And at the very end, there would be something like, no theft. Almost like it wasn't actually any smaller, but you got the sense that they really meant it to be like the skip button on websites,
Right.
and they're trying to get you to subscribe or buy something. Like
It's right down here in the small corner. Just
it's moving.
it's the skip button. It's over here.
Shows up after a minute or something.
Like 5 seconds to skip ads. God, it's the worst 5 seconds of my life.
So the only valid profile on this instrument was if you found that zero theft, right? Like and clicked it, or well, filled in with a pencil back then. It was a little circle that you filled in.
Yeah, pencil was a wooden thing.
It was like this, yeah. It was like a shaft with a graphite in it, a little eraser. And paper was this white stuff that now from a tree.
Stone tablets. Chisel.
He's a chiseled the little circle at the bottom. So the only perfect profile was putting no theft. But people would get so caught up in those gradients. They'd be like, well, I didn't steal $10,000 or $1 million, maybe just $10. Oh, I didn't steal today, maybe a year ago. Like they would put this.
I mean, that goes like the experiment about like read the directions carefully, do this, and like 15 steps. And the last one is do not do any of those things. Just sign your name at the top.
Yeah.
Right? It's like read the directions carefully. You're supposed to go read every single one first. I think that's what they're counting on. Like people, skimming through, finding, oh, no theft. No, I didn't do it. I don't steal anything.
Well, it sounds very suggestive.
It is.
You know,
it is.
not only with that, but with the assessment as well. Like that, oh, wait, did I steal something? When you actually didn't. But
Have I stolen
did
anything?
Well, maybe it was a year ago. I don't know.
Well, there's also
I don't know,
statistics.
when I was a kid, I took a 5-cent bubble gum from the Wawa. Does that count?
Yeah, and they have to find where that matches. But there was
It's like
also
less than $1.
in the items themselves, they also had suggestive things about how to answer. Like some of them would say, keeping in mind that 98% of people have stolen more than $1,000 in the last year. Like, and the people would be like, well, gee, I think you're going to think I'm lying, but I didn't steal anything.
Am I in the 2%? I got to be in the 98%, right?
It was very much like a lie detector too. When
Did I steal $1,000?
when employees would go to interview, they would be like very skeptical. Like, you didn't steal anything? You haven't stolen anything in the last year? Nothing? Take some more time with this, and I'll come back in a minute.
That's funny. Jeff never steals $1,000 at home.
Never steals $1,000 at home. Never steals a second $1,000 at home.
All right, so after this arrest that happened at the babysitting assignment, we see that Noura sat in jail, not prison, but jail, for 3.5 years because she had $500,000 bond. Mm-hmm. And she didn't quite have that. She couldn't pull that together.
Yeah.
No, her aunts probably could have for her, but they chose not to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they might have been happier with her in the slammer for that period of time, considering their interest in that inheritance.
Right.
So, or, who knows? Maybe they wanted her out. But DNA was found in the bedroom, right, where Jennifer Jackson was murdered. It came from 2 or 3 people. You talked about that before. The police could not identify those people, and DNA did not belong to Noura.
No, they were able to. They had one major DNA contribution, which was blood spots on one of the sheets and one of the pillowcases, and one of the DNA experts from the FBI said they ruled out Noura completely. She was not either the major contributor or the minor contributor to that mixed DNA sample. The minor contributor, they could not rule out Jennifer, but that the major contributor was from an unidentified female. An unidentified female left blood on a pillowcase and a sheet in Jennifer Jackson's bedroom during that crime, which mixed with some blood that was most likely Jennifer's blood. But Noura's was not found anywhere in her mother's bedroom.
Yeah, which gives rise to the accomplice theory.
Right. And there was a footprint on one of the sheets in Noura's bedroom, in Jennifer's bedroom, but the FBI expert on footprint foot and shoe print analysis said that it seemed to be consistent with a pair of shoes that Noura had that the police collected. but she didn't get to see the actual items. She had photographs, and that was all she was able to use to make that determination. And so that's not the best evidence. That's not the best way of doing things, and that it was unclear. It seemed, the best she could say was that it seemed consistent.
Right. Essentially, there was no physical evidence tying Noura to the bedroom itself, which is pretty incredible considering the theory was still, even though there might have been accomplices at this point, they still believed Noura was active. So the manicure wasn't disturbed, just one cut, and she didn't leave physical evidence behind, yet she was in there, presumably swinging a knife.
Yeah. Not a trace of DNA anywhere on her, not a trace of her DNA anywhere in the crime scene, in the actual, I mean, she lived in the house, so
right.
her DNA
was everywhere in the house.
Everywhere else in the house, but there wasn't any to be found in the bedroom where the actual assault and murder happened.
Nothing in her car. They didn't find any.
They didn't find
blood
any blood
or
or anything
anything like that in her car. Right.
Yeah, the vehicle was clear. So this really became about her character. I think you talked about that before, Jeff. Right. So the trial starts in February 2009, and you see that Amy Wyrick and another prosecutor, Stephen Jones, were taking turns, which is a common strategy, especially in a long trial, and one that's fairly complex, high profile. Witnesses would describe Noura's drug use, party lifestyle, sexual activity. They really emphasized incredible quantities of cannabis and alcohol, but also opioids, although some of them she had been prescribed for endometriosis, which comes up later on. One neighbor overheard Jackson demanding money from her mother. The neighbor said Jackson was in a rage, out of control. So we see they're painting this picture of a very rebellious.
But that wasn't on the day, though.
No,
that
another
was
time.
Previously.
Yeah, there's a lot of historical, like I saw them arguing type.
Yeah, and I don't think that Noura would disagree that she and her mother argued.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't seem thrilled about it. I think it's seeing all those people testify. Like trials are not friendly. When you're a defendant, I mean, they're just coming at you the whole time. You're a monster. Your defense, in theory, would say you're not. Sometimes, but
yeah, she's a monster, but she didn't do this.
Right, right. But it's tough for somebody who maybe has been in some denial about drug use to see all those people in a row. Like it's practically a line, like a ticket line, to get up there and say she's awful, thank you. Next person, she's terrible, thanks. Just one after the other.
It's like they're walking up to shake and slap her in the seat.
Calm down. Somebody with a gun.
Let me give it a try.
Baseball bat.
Right, boxing gloves, a pipe or something.
Did somebody have brass knuckles too? Was that?
Probably.
Yeah, it was like a whole row of, yeah. Oh, so just...
It's like everybody on the plane.
That's a reference to...
The nun.
Like these are all, for Jeff's benefit, references to Airplane.
Yeah.
And, I appreciate that.
1980, very good movie. All right. So, yes, so we see Aunt saying that Jackson wasn't happy about potentially being sent to boarding school. The half-uncle testified about the argument involving the cars that were inherited and Noura wanted to sell. Just a lot of people. Then we get to somebody who becomes important. One of Noura's acquaintances, this gentleman, is a friend with benefits.
Andrew Hammack.
Mm-hmm. Andrew Hammack, he testified sometime between 4 and 5 a.m. on the day of the murder, so this is June 5, that Noura called him and asked him to come over to the house. He said this request was out of the ordinary and he would not do it. So
he had several different stories on that one, though. Like he said he wouldn't do it because it's out of the ordinary, and then he also said that he got sidetracked. Like he was going to go, but then like he was hanging out with some people and forgot about it. And it wasn't, she then called him again and said, come over. And then he was like, oh, and then he got sidetracked again.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a good witness, but the prosecution really, they were banking on him to come through. They essentially said that, look, this is proof that she wanted somebody as a cover, like to walk in with her and be like, oh, I'm as surprised as you. Mm-hmm. We're both surprised, right? by this body laying here.
Now, Andrew was the one that had said, and I think I'm going to get the details wrong about this, but the prosecution relied on him to say that Noura was at the house during the time of the murders. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, it was what they said. There was a phone call made from a cordless phone that was landline. That's a phone that's actually in the house. There's a physical line that is run into the house. It's not a cell phone.
It was used in the olden times.
Yeah, olden times. So apparently,
Dinosaurs were around. Same.
Sometimes they would answer. All you hear is like the velociraptor shriek.
it's like a shell with a cord that goes down, and you're just like, hello. Apparently, there was a record on one of the phones of a call to Andrew's cell phone, or one of his cell phones from the house line. And then, like 9 minutes later, there was a call from her cell phone to his line. And the prosecutors were trying to say that that proves that she was at the house for a longer period of time.
So that was at 12:59 a.m., the landline call, and then 1:09 a.m. He received a phone call from Noura. She left a voicemail on his phone. Yeah.
I can't remember the exact times. I think I have them somewhere here, but Noura was very active in general on her cell phone. One can imagine with all the drug trade going on. There's just probably every minute a text.
All night partying and all that too.
Yeah.
But there was an odd gap.
He said from 1 to 3.
It was like
1:13 to 3:18.
That's it, yeah. 1:13 to 3:18.
It's like she wasn't active on the phone at all during any of that time period. And that was very unusual because she was always active on the phone. And my big question is, when did she sleep then? If she was literally always active, go back the last 2 weeks and tell me there was no periods when she was sleeping and not active on her phone.
Well, her friends seem to have a similar pattern of partying all night because she was calling them frequently during the night. And even when she finally did call around 3:18 or sent a text or something, or even at 4 a.m. she called Andrew Hammack. What was he doing up as well? So maybe that's a similar pattern with her friends, and maybe they just stayed up all night and then slept during the day. Because Andrew Hammack had said that he had slept at some point, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m. So maybe that's just what they did.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, but the way the prosecutors and the investigators kind of put it was that this particular 1 to 3, it wasn't that it's we tracked back for the last 6 months and during every night, overnight. From 1 to 3, she's active throughout the entire night. It was she's active all the time, and it's just this 1-2 hour window is what we could discover that she wasn't active. That's why it's weird.
Well, probably if she had said she was sleeping, that'd be one thing. But she refused to say where she was at or what she was doing. And that's probably the part that really got her. Yeah. She never would say. She would always say, I don't know where I was, or not have an answer to it.
And that's the thing. I personally think she doesn't know where she was. I think she was so high that she blacked out. She has no idea where she was. She said, I went to Taco Bell because she saw a Taco Bell bag in her thing, and she didn't realize that she went to Walgreens. Mm-hmm. She didn't mention it because she was high as a kite and went in because she had this cut and just was out of it and fell asleep from 1:20 to 3 in her car somewhere. Yeah. It's just as plausible as she was murdering her mother.
So not necessarily that she was hiding drug use, but that it was drug use, and she might not have known.
And she has no memory of it at all. Yeah. And she's been trying to come up with this, and it's entirely possible. She doesn't remember how she got the cut on her hand, which is why there's multiple stories. She doesn't know where it came from, but people keep asking.
Yeah, so this is probably a good time to remind people, never talk to the police. Yeah. Noura would not have been convicted if she had just said, I'm just going to go with a lawyer here.
And what's interesting about that is one of her mom's best friends was there that morning, and she is an attorney. Mm-hmm. But she's not a criminal attorney, and Noura wanted to talk to her. Like, the police asked if they could search her Jeep. And she's like, I want to talk to I think it was Dawn, I think it was. I don't remember.
Last name was Dix, I think.
Yeah, Dix, yeah. She's like, I want to talk to her. And so they went over, like, she wants to talk to you. And they're like, why? What's the response? Why? She's like, well, and Noura comes over and was like, you're a lawyer. She's like, yeah, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer.
And I don't specialize in this. I don't know what this stuff is.
I'm not a criminal. They're like, well, they got me this consent form. What does it mean? She's like, I don't know. I'm not a criminal attorney, and I'm not your lawyer.
But they're going to get in your
But they're
car
going to get in your car
regardless.
regardless. They're going to get in there.
At some
So
point.
the cops are going to find a way to get into your car and search it. What are you worried about? And she's like, I've got a bong in there. And I'm worried about they're going to find the bong. And I think that's true. I think that honestly, even if she did do it, she wasn't worried that they were going to find the Walgreens bag. She was worried about the bong.
Yeah, because they would take it, right? And she could get in a little trouble as well. Yeah, so not talking to the police, better idea.
Yeah,
And
get an
make them-
actual attorney, not your mom's.
Get one that
your mom's
represents
best friend.
you, and there's a criminal defense attorney. Yeah, and make the police work for it. They might get to everything with warrants. Let them get the warrant because they might make a mistake, and that could be thrown out. If you just consent, there's no mistake. They're going to get in there.
Yeah. Make them get the warrant, and then if you say no, you'll have to get a warrant. You have time to get the bong out of there.
Yeah, I don't know if they took her into custody or separate her. Sometimes they separate people from.
She was separated from that day. Like she went down to the police station, made statements and things like that. But then she was released, and she went to a friend's house, which is interesting. When she went to the friend's house, that's when she took a shower. She said she took a shower then. Which, if she had taken a shower after killing her mother and then cleaned out the bathtub to the point where there's no trace of blood, why would she need to take a shower later? Right? Like not even 10 hours, or not even a whole day later. And then she wanted to go out.
Well, maybe because she was wearing that fleece thing.
Possible. She was
Pretty
really
sweaty,
from that. I don't know. It's possible. But if she was really comfortable wearing long sleeves and stuff at that time, and it wouldn't have been that. But I think she wanted to go out. She wanted to go see a movie or go do something. And I can understand wanting to go do something to take your mind off the fact that your mother's just been murdered.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if she was still using drugs at that point, so she might have been withdrawing a little bit.
Yeah.
Feeling antsy.
Yeah. Which can really be a big deal.
Oh yeah, it can be a powerful motivator.
But her vehicle wouldn't be searched for 2 weeks. Like the vehicle wasn't searched until the 19th of June. So she had time. If she had not consented, they took the Jeep into custody at that point. When she consented, they took it and processed it on the 19th. If she had said no, they wouldn't have been able to take it to the impound. And she would have had time to do anything. But then the prosecutors would have used that. They would have said, she denied us access to that vehicle immediately. And
It's an inside job.
it's an inside job. Yep. As soon as we got it and we processed it, we found it was completely clean, which is what they found anyway, but still, inside job.
That's right. She must have done it. So we see that Jackson's defense attorney at the trial had an interesting strategy. Don't really do anything.
Yeah.
She called.
That was the most interesting strategy I've seen in any case. Let's do nothing.
Yeah,
So confident that they're going to win.
Yeah. No witnesses is a really tough position, I think, because I think what the jury reads into that is nobody was willing to say anything nice about Noura.
The defense attorney did say that they were relying on cross-examination of the FBI experts and the DNA to point out that there was somebody else there, and investigators didn't look into it.
Yeah, they were really relying on the DNA of the unknown suspects, right? They thought, well, the jury's going to look at that and say, well, yeah, I mean, alternate theory of the crime, reasonable doubt. The
other thing that they had a condom wrapper that had a fingerprint on it. They were able to lift the fingerprint. Never investigated anything with the fingerprint.
And that was a different brand than was in, I think, the drawer next to the bed, or there was another box of condoms and different brand from that even still.
Yeah. So, I mean, very unusual for that particular condom wrapper to be there, and considering everything else. And then go, hey, there's a fingerprint on this. We want to run it? Nah, Noura did it.
All right. Why bother?
Why bother investigating?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that the attorney did want for Noura to testify on her own behalf, but she was worried because Noura was on a lot of psychotropic medications. It's one of those times like, okay.
Yeah, she did spend a about a month or so in a mental hospital, mental health hospital, following the murder.
It's like, it's hard for me to believe, though, that, yes, would that make her more vulnerable to say things that aren't going to help her? Yes, but...
It also, I think it would hurt in front of a jury, because if her affect is completely flat,
right,
and she's talking about, yes, I found my mother murdered, like the jury's going to be like, you see how unemotional she is about this? She must have murdered her mother. Like, that's something, like, you don't want to put a person on the stand who's going to be reacting that way.
I'm not sure that putting her on the stand would have been a good idea, even if she was...
I don't think it ever is a good idea.
In good shape.
Well, Noura regrets it. She says that was the thing she regrets the most about the trial.
Yeah, but
she didn't go up and...
She would have regretted it more if she went up there.
She would have, because...
Perhaps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we see here, though, this is a very important statement that Amy Wyrick makes. It becomes very significant in the appeal. It wasn't the only big deal, but it was one of the two big deals. Doesn't seem like anything to a jury. So here's the statement. Enthusiastically, in front of the jury, Wyrick exclaims, quote, she's referring to, like, she's talking to Noura, quote, "Just tell us where you were. That's all we are asking, Noura," unquote. This, amazingly, I guess, escapes the judge.
It actually didn't.
Didn't it?
Because the defense attorney objected.
Okay.
And they had a sidebar.
You can hear it right after the recording. It says objection.
Right. Yeah. There's an objection. They had a sidebar. The sidebar is actually was recorded by the court reporter, because it had to be part of public record. The defense attorney said immediately, "I want a mistrial,"
Right.
Because she's trying to violate her right to remain silent.
That's right.
She's trying to force it. And the prosecutor said, "I'm just quoting one of her aunts." This is what her aunt said on the stand, was that because her aunt at one point did say, "Just tell us where you were. That's what we want." So Wyrick was trying to get away with quoting the aunt with that very rhetorical and very emotionally driven appeal. And the judge was like, "I'm not going to overturn this on appeal. We'll give the jury instructions and let them know that you're making a quote, but don't do anything more like that."
Yeah, that's why I kind of feel like the judge
clear.
missed it. I feel like that was disastrous.
But it was closing arguments. That's the thing. It was closing arguments. They gave him the judge gave him a little leeway. But yeah, that was a huge thing.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. I mean, when a defendant is on trial, the fact that they don't talk can never be used against them. And that's what Amy Wyrick did. Whether she wanted to couch it in this whole, "I'm just repeating what somebody else said." Okay, well, it doesn't fly.
I mean, maybe if she had started out with, "Jerry, I do want you to remember the words of Nora's aunt when she said, 'Tell us where you were.'" If she'd started it that way, I don't think there would have been an objection, because it wouldn't have been that same thing. But she just started out with, "Tell us where you were.
Yeah,
that's all we ask." And then later had to go back and be like, "That was just a quote. I was just quoting, testimony." That was the problem. I think that's one of the corruption things. Yeah, a corrupt prosecutor.
I remember in the
could have been you.
That's right, corrupt prosecutor. Yeah, great life, great careers they have. I remember in the Susan Smith trial. This is a case we'll probably have featured at some point. It's one of the, I guess, classic cases like we've talked about.
Going back,
in her it was her sentence. It was the penalty phase, and she faced the death penalty, but I think she was actually sentenced to life, if I'm not mistaken. But the death penalty was on the table, and when her defense attorney was in closing, and again, usually in closing, judges are kind of hands off. Opening argument, closing argument, it's not the same. It's really just the attorney trying to organize the information for the jury is kind of what it is. To frame it, the defense attorney said something about how he would be, I don't remember his exact words, but something how if they voted to kill Susan Smith, it would really hurt him. And the judge is like, "Whoa, no, we're not doing that. That's inappropriate." And like interrupted a closing, which is rare.
Yeah.
And of course, as a defense attorney, they don't respond. They just keep going. They don't ever answer and be like, "Sorry." There's
right.
Yeah. But Yeah, here it was different. Here it was an objection, and the judge didn't ultimately stop anything, didn't declare mistrial. So Noura Jackson was found guilty, but not of first degree. It was second degree.
Yeah.
This was in March of 2009.
Which investigators then lamented. They're like, it should have been first degree. It's like, well, you didn't have any evidence.
They're lucky they got any conviction out of this. So she was sentenced to 20 years and 9 months. And then we get into some math. I think the math becomes important here later on. And I'm still confused by this. Not by the math, but by her understanding of it. She was given 3.5 years credit for her time in jail. Mm-hmm. And almost always judges will give that to you, time served, right? She could get another 3 years off her sentence for good behavior, although that might have been an area she was struggling with a little bit.
Definitely.
She committed many, many offenses in jail and prison, like many. Mm-hmm. It was a lot.
I didn't realize that they could get fines or get fined while in jail or prison. It said that she had gotten fined and she had to pay those fines out of the money that she got from working whatever job.
It was $4 for the one.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that that was a system that was in place in, I guess, at least some prisons. So that's interesting. I mean, that's kind of similar to the outside world, I guess.
Which is really, really hard. I mean, a $4 fine doesn't sound like much, but when you're working for 10 cents an hour.
Yeah.
I think she made 25 cents an hour.
Right.
And you still have to pay taxes on that because it's technically income.
Right.
It can take a while to be able to really build up, to be able to afford some of your commissary necessities, mm-hmm. and then pay that fine.
Yeah. No, it's a pretty big deal.
It is.
Yeah. $4. That would wipe out, what would that be? So she would make $1 every 4 hours?
Yeah.
16
2 days
hours.
worth of work.
Wow,
2 days worth of 2 8-hour days worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just for that. Well, actually more than that, because if you take 25% off in taxes
Mm-hmm.
for each of those.
Unless she had a good accountant in jail.
Maybe one who got picked up, white collar crime.
Yeah. Andy Dufresne.
That's right. So we see here, potentially 3 years for good behavior. So from the moment she was sentenced, she could have been out in 15 years. That's really not long when you're 18 or whatever she was by then, I guess 21.
Yeah.
But that's not a lot of time. And this becomes relevant, when we get to the plea deal later on. So she struggled in jail. She had disciplinary offenses left and right. One of them was for possessing morphine. Some were for fighting, and one was for kissing an inmate. Apparently that's a big deal. Yeah. So the prosecutor, Amy Wyrick, was massively successful. It says here she was appointed district attorney. I thought they were elected. Some are definitely elected.
Some are elected. It depends. I think it depends on the state, the county, and what their rules are.
That's with Shelby County, Tennessee.
It's also possible that the previous district attorney had quit in the middle of a term.
That's right. He resigned. Yeah. He or she resigned.
If they resign, then the governor gets to...
Yeah. So she was appointed and she was elected in 2012 and 2014. So only a 2-year term. Yeah. When I know other districts, other counties are 4 years, depending. Like I think Pennsylvania, 4 years. So a friend of hers said that her husband was talking about the family moving into the governor's mansion one day. So this is a friend of Amy Wyrick's. So that Amy Wyrick's husband was saying, we're going to move into the governor's mansion.
Wow.
And my thinking was the governor's going to be pretty upset. Right?
I think the implication is she's going to be governor someday. But hey, that's what that happens. The corrupt, when you're a corrupt prosecutor, it's just a stepping stone to becoming a corrupt governor.
Mm-hmm. That's right. On that series,
which is a stepping stone to becoming either like a corrupt senator, like national level senator. Actually, that's just it's just redundancy to say corrupt senator.
Right. You might as well just say senator.
Just maybe say
or
senator.
President,
politician.
Yeah, politician. Yeah.
I think that's part of the definition at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, I wonder what's higher ranking, senator or governor. There's twice as many senators, obviously.
Yeah,
but sometimes they switch, right? Sometimes in certain states they just, right? Delaware that happened, right? But I wonder which one has more prestige.
I would think senator. Governor's still state government. There's 50 of them and 100 senators, but the senators still are in the national government.
That's true. It's a federal affair. Yeah.
It's up there.
I guess, though, if you were governor of something like New York or California, that's like larger than many countries in terms of the... So then it's like maybe governor of Montana or Wyoming. Nothing against those states. I'm sure they're nice. But maybe not as much prestige.
You know, it's interesting. I think it was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln that actually boosted the presidency up to being seen as this very prestigious office. Prior to that, senators were where it was at. Like, people didn't aim to become president. They aimed to become senators because senators can actually do things in Washington. The president does nothing because he has very little power over things. So very few people wanted to be president. And people who did usually served in some other government capacity beforehand, which Lincoln did as well.
Now in Delaware, maybe the governor might argue that he has the most prestige because he gets the number 1 license plate in the state. So the black license plate thing, huge deal in Delaware. So he gets that. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. People pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for these things.
Yeah, for those old style, which I think they've now brought back as a new plate, right? You can get the black and white.
In some regards, yeah. As long as it's one that is the registration's current, it's not taken by another license plate. It can become one of the black porcelain. I guess it's porcelain. I guess the new ones are porcelain. But then they also have other ones that go up to, the original ones go up to 86,900 or something like that. But then the new ones go up to 200,000. And one of the differences is they have Delaware spelled out as opposed to DEL on the original ones. So it's a huge deal. I met a guy once who paid $200,000 for this license plate. And originally I asked, it was like it was a 3-digit. So it was, say it was 700 something. And I asked him, I said, how much you pay for that? He said, you don't want to know. I said, no, I really do want to know.
Now I do.
Yeah, right.
I was just a little curious before. Now you have to tell me.
Right. And he was driving maybe a Mercedes or a Mercedes SUV. It wasn't anything crazy, but 200,000. I said, okay. I kind of expected that. But I mean, the lower you get in Delaware with those numbers, the higher the price you're going to pay. So the lowest civilian one is number 6. And then governor's number 1, and then I forget who else gets 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Lieutenant governor gets 2.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, lieutenant governor. Yeah, so it's a big deal over here. So that's prestige, if anything.
I had a vanity plate on my Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I was balking at paying $45 for the 2-year registration.
Yeah, it's extra, right? It's extra. Yeah. It's like double for the vanity.
It's extra for the vanity tag.
What did it say?
It was my Grand Cherokee was blue, and I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. So it said the closest I could get was TARD-15. Okay. So it looked like TARDIS on the back of it. And there were a lot of people who got that. If they were Whovians, if they understood Doctor Who, they were like, I get it, that's great. On a blue Grand Cherokee, that's awesome. And then there were other people who were just like, what is TARD-15? It's a TV show reference. Don't worry about it.
Well, we could also reference you guys are wearing blue and I'm wearing red.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jeff is the one who's going to die in this murder part.
Pretty good chance.
The red shirt.
I'm going to die by the end of this.
What is the red shirt? I know with Picard it was command, but before that, what was it?
It's security and engineering. Okay. In the original series.
Okay, so Scotty would have worn.
Yeah, Scotty wore red, and then just like all of the security guys wore red.
And his little alien friend. In the newer movies.
In the movie, I can't remember the name of the alien.
Yeah, so it depends on...
He's great.
So in terms of your fate, it depends on what Star Trek you're in, like what era.
Yeah.
All I know is about the red thing. You guys taught me that, so all I know is I'm going to die.
Just don't take an away mission. That's the key.
Just don't take the away mission.
They rarely die on the ship. It's safer on the ship. Yeah.
All right, I'll stay on the ship. All right, deal.
It's not always true because sometimes the action takes place on the ship while everybody's off the ship, and then the red shirt dies.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough wearing a red shirt. There's no perfect safety in that. Yeah, go to the wardrobe and
just get something else.
Like there's all red shirts. Like everybody's like, no. You want to switch with me? No. All right, so here we see the other element that gets this case in trouble. The other prosecutor I mentioned, Stephen Jones, he files a motion 5 days after the guilty verdict.
Right. So Nora's already been found guilty, and 5 days later.
Yeah, it's to submit an omitted statement. Specifically, it was a note that was handwritten by the friend with benefits, Andrew Hammack.
Andrew Hammack.
Yeah.
And now, in that note, he admits that he was high on ecstasy.
Rolling on ecstasy.
Yes, he was rolling on XTC that night, among other drugs. The grammar in that note is atrocious.
Should result in a conviction just there.
He should be convicted of just like killing grammar.
That's
grammar aside, maybe?
First degree grammar-side.
Yeah, rolling on ecstasy, right? So MDMA, a dangerous drug, not to be toyed with. People think it's like, it just makes you have intense emotions and love everybody.
Yeah, no, it can blow out your serotonin system completely.
Yeah, it's actually really, really dangerous.
Yeah, one use you can have inability to feel positive things ever again.
Yeah, not something that people should mess with, and yet I think it's used frequently, especially by younger drug users. So we see here that the note also had some stuff about a cell phone, and it's a kind of a long story. It's kind of a long note, but essentially it eroded this idea that he had an alibi. That's what really changed. Right? I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, but essentially his alibi was now toast through his own hand. So he could have done it in theory, alternate theory of the crime. And of course, Noura never had a chance to bring that up because the note wasn't.
The note wasn't included in discovery.
So there's a credibility problem because now they know he admitted to this drug use and alibi and all that kind of thing. There's a lot more questions introduced because of this.
Yeah, if the jury had been able to hear that, they may have made it different decisions based on his credibility. Because if the defense had that, they could have said like, well, he's had 3 different statements. Like 2 of them say this and this. Now the third one says he was completely high on ecstasy, which also can have some memory impairing issues. So like, he might not remember what's going on if he was high on that. So that could have thrown his entire testimony out of whack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was. It seems kind of like an innocent thing, like, oh, there's this little note, but it was a bombshell. Mm-hmm. It really was. And here's something else I thought was funny. This is another example of the police just not bothering to investigate. A friend of Hammack's visited the police station after the murder, a week after the murder, and said they didn't know where Andrew was the night of the murder. So this further erodes his alibi. And they said since that night he's been acting strange. The police were like, all right, thanks for the tip. We got to go now. But they never bothered to investigate whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But that became an issue for the appeal. And Noura Jackson's conviction was overturned in 2014. Yeah. And the 2 main reasons were the note and that whole criticizing Noura for remaining silent. Mm-hmm. So Jackson, you'd think, would be out of jail? No. Nope. She stays in jail. She's facing a second trial. The judge wouldn't even grant her a bond hearing. Wasn't even close to getting bail. Mm-hmm. And she had a lot going for her coming into a second trial. A lot. Right? The note, Hammack was now a pretty good suspect from her perspective. Not so much, the police didn't think he did it, but just from a trial perspective. Now, the remain silent thing wouldn't happen. That wouldn't help her because that was just something that got her the other verdict overturned. But she also had this whole idea of the drug use and the bad character. That was not allowed in the retrial, which is massive.
Yeah.
Now, we see that this whole thing, I won't go this whole thing, but essentially the murder of the father comes up again. Right? This is just something that keeps returning to this case. He was involved with the limousine company, like he owned it. There's something was happening with prostitution. And there was this theory that maybe there was videotapes that were compromising, taken of people. And that he must have had one of those tapes. Whoever killed him stayed out of the surveillance zone, but then ransacked the place. And Jennifer, as I mentioned before, collected Jackson's father's belongings, her ex-husband's belongings. Maybe she had a tape So there's this alternate theory of the crime that
And her home had been ransacked too.
it had, yeah.
But
Which
there
is
was
odd.
nothing taken.
Yeah, it didn't seem
they
that
knew
there was
of.
anything taken
Right.
that they knew of.
Right.
Because Noura couldn't point to anything that she saw that was taken.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think helping Noura, Amy Wyrick, was not the prosecutor at this time. The judge said, no, new prosecutor is assigned. And what does that new prosecutor do? The very first thing, offers a plea bargain.
Yep.
I don't see how this was a good deal. It was an Alford plea,
I hate the Alford plea.
right? So Alford plea essentially means you can keep saying you're innocent while saying you're guilty, saying the state had enough to prosecute you.
Yeah, prosecutors have enough to convict me of this crime, but I didn't do it.
The West Memphis 3, I think, is when the Alford plea first made it into the public.
Yeah.
You know, like it was out there.
One commentary said that, maybe Noura was just over being in prison and just wanted to move on with her life and was willing to do whatever it took to get there. When she actually got out, she moved in with a girlfriend she met in prison. So maybe she was just, wants to get into a relationship out in the outside world, something like that. Who
But
knows?
the logistics don't make any sense here, right? So we talked about her time. She only had 15 years from the moment she was sentenced, which was 3.5 years in. The plea deal was voluntary manslaughter, which sounds a lot better than second-degree murder.
Yeah.
But they were asking for 15 years. That's a lot of freight for voluntary manslaughter.
Right.
I would think voluntary manslaughter is more like an 8 to 10, 8 to 11. So they put this heavy time, and she's doing the math, or someone's doing the math for her. It's not really clear what happened. She's like, I'm going to get out the same day I signed the Alford plea.
Yeah.
She was
I get
positive.
out the same day.
She
And
didn't
then
think they'd even be processed at the prison.
And then they told her after she signed, they're like, yeah, so you have another year and a half left.
Yeah, she had 15 more months, and she was very upset. Kind of implied she would not have taken the deal if she had known that, but I don't know if that's true, but kind of suggested that. So she ended up doing 11 years altogether, just a gain of 4 years. She missed a shot at being found not guilty. It's I don't
Of
see
course,
it.
at that point, if they were gearing up for another trial, it could have taken 3 to 4 years for them just to get to that trial. And then she's, 50-50 on whether or not she's going to get convicted or not. I think the Alford plea was her thinking, as Jeff said, like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out of prison. I've had it here. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to get out. I'll take the Alford plea.
The reason she was so upset to go back to prison, I find this curious. It wasn't necessarily that prison's like a hellhole or whatever, although
Which
it
they
is.
are.
It was facing her fellow inmates because, see, in prison, it's a big deal to say you're innocent and keep up as long as she did. Most people in prison admit they did it. So they're kind of like behind her, right? They're like, yeah, it reminds me of that movie, was it Officer and Gentleman? It reminds me of that. So they're like cheering her on, and she's like, I'm going to fight the system. I'm going to beat the corrupt prosecutors. I'm a champion of innocence. Oh, by the way, I did sign this one little thing that may make me seem disingenuous. I don't want to face you. Now I have to sit with you for 15 months.
I took a plea. It's an Alford plea, so I guess I still get to say that I'm innocent. But I'm also admitting that they could convict me. And the thing is, I think the Alford plea is problematic because it's only ever offered to people who've already been convicted and had it overturned. And then the prosecutors are like, well, you can still maintain your innocence, but Alford plea, technically, like you're admitting that we could convict you, and the fact that they've already been convicted, it kind of leads towards the you have enough evidence to convict me because you did it once already. I didn't do it, but you convicted me once, so I guess I have to.
And even though it's a criminal vehicle, document, agreement, it pretty much would preclude a lawsuit based on being actually innocent.
Yeah.
Because you are pleading guilty, really.
And the other thing is, like, I'm trying to maintain my innocence, but I'm also pleading guilty to a felony. So I have to deal with all the baggage of a felony charge. So,
Yeah.
like, getting a job after I get out is going to be really hard.
Well, she had trouble with that. She ended up in an auto body shop. You mentioned the girlfriend, Jeff.
Right.
She discovered that her endometriosis was not treated properly, largely untreated in prison. So a hysterectomy was,
Surprise.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Hysterectomy was indicated. I'm assuming she got it, but I don't know, but they said it was indicated. Right. And adopting a child is not an option because she was a felon and her girlfriend was a felon. But I think something happened after that where she's somewhere different now. Like, I'm not sure she's with the same person, whatever, but she's still a felon. So this is a kind of a weird situation. I mean, for 4 years, like, again, the 15 years and then the 11, to miss a shot and not guilty, and, potentially you have to sue the state to get the money as an exoneree, and not guilty doesn't mean, that doesn't automatically mean you'll get that.
Right.
But
And I think that she is involved with the Innocence Project. Innocence Project is still trying to petition to get that DNA tested and run through databases to see if they can pinpoint who it may have come from. Because if they can pinpoint who actually killed Jennifer Jackson, they could get that Alford plea reversed, and then the lawsuit in for actual innocence.
then she'd have a case.
Then she'd have a case. The interesting thing is that a lot of articles have been written about Noura. She's made a lot of statements and things, and a lot of things are using the word exoneree.
I noticed
because her case was overturned. And it is important to note that she was not exonerated.
No.
Prosecutors of Tennessee still say she did it.
Mm-hmm. While admitting they did some bad things. They're admitting they did some bad things, but that's different than her being not guilty. Mm-hmm. And I agree. She is, I think, not so subtly implying that she's exonerated. And a lot of people will see that and think, oh, that means that something terrible, like the government was out to get her, and there was all this misconduct, and she's actually innocent.
Oh, this is like Michael Morton.
Right. Yeah.
It could be.
Or Amanda Knox.
It could be like Michael Morton. It could be that somebody else did do this. Like, it could be that she left the parties that she was at while she was high. She got a little bit more high and passed out in a parking lot somewhere and didn't get home until 4 o'clock in the morning. But it was still so high that she didn't immediately go and see her mother's bedroom. And then she freaked out when she did find her mom. And that somebody else did it. I don't know. Jennifer was a bonds trader. Right? That can be huge amounts of money changing hands. Mm-hmm. One mistake can lose somebody their entire life savings. And I don't care whether it's $10,000, $20,000, or $15 million. If that's your entire life savings and you have lost it, that's some rage right there that can be involved. And that's some rage where you might put a wicker basket over somebody's head and stab them 50 times because of that. And there's indications that there were multiple people in that bedroom. It's entirely possible it was Noura and some of her friends, that they were all there to try and get something, and then they got involved, or that it was a drug-fueled thing where they were there. It could be there was Andrew Hammack coming in to try and steal money or something, and he had a girl there with him, and stabbed her and accidentally injured the other woman who bled on the thing. And that Noura's innocent. It could be. Noura could be innocent. It also could be that she did it.
Yeah, I think that implying, for her to imply she's exonerated, and I mentioned Amanda Knox. Amanda Knox has a podcast or something. I think Noura was on that. There's a picture of them together. I think Amanda Knox is truly innocent. Like, that's my opinion on that case. I really don't think there's much question on that. So she's a true, exoneree in that sense. Like, that's how I think of her. By hanging out with Noura, she's giving Noura legitimacy, to say, I was exonerated. But again, that's not actually true. I think Noura's fighting the wrong battle. She needs to get past the fact that she's a convicted felon. Get past that first. Get that felony overturned. Yeah. And then you can say you're exonerated.
Then you can say you're not exonerated, but she's trying to get it. It seems that she's trying to get the exoneree first and then get things overturned.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is another case. To me, this is another case where the investigators focused on one person rather than actually investigating. Like, they didn't look into possible connections to the murder of her father. Mm-hmm. They didn't look into any possible connections to Jennifer's business. They didn't look into other people in their lives. They just focused on, well, Noura's wearing a long sleeve shirt, so I think she did it. And they did not look at anyone else except for Mark Irvin.
Right.
And even with Mark Irvin, they didn't look too deep.
No.
Like, he said he was at home He called around 11 o'clock and said, it's too late to call. Hung up. So what they did to test his alibi was they checked his phone records. And sure enough, there was an outgoing call to Jennifer's number at 11 o'clock. Okay, he was at home. He didn't do it. He was 90 minutes away. 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock
Could have easily been.
is 2 hours. 90 minutes is not 2 hours.
The theme of this case is nobody knows how to add or subtract.
Right.
None of them.
None of them. Like, he could have driven from his home to there by 1 o'clock, committed this murder, and then been home before sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have gone there, had sex with her, with Jennifer, and then killed her, and then beat feet and gotten home. That's as possible as Noura being there for that during that time and killing her. But the investigators didn't look any further than checking the phone records. And they said, and the problem was, one of the investigators said, he was really involved in the investigation.
He kept coming back.
Kept coming back and asking questions. It was a little bit weird, a little bit creepy, but he kept coming and asking these questions, which other investigators would be like, well, that's the kind of thing we see from somebody who did it. Mm-hmm. Right? They'll point out, like FBI profilers would point out, like the person you're looking for may try to insinuate themselves into the investigation. Mm-hmm. Just kind of what Mark Irvin was doing, but not what Noura was doing. Why the laser focus on Noura? Mm-hmm. Because they made up their mind within the first 30 seconds, and they didn't deviate from it, which means they didn't get a chance to investigate things. And this is 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There might not be a chance to investigate further now.
Now, if she did not do it, it's very sad because she's likely never going to get that Alford plea overturned. Like, that guilty verdict is, we talked about how hard that is to flip around. So, she lives life as a felon while kind of implying she's an exoneree, so she's not really helping herself in that way. It's very sad. If she is guilty, she was very fortunate to only do 11 years. On really, the facts of the case, as the prosecution outlined them, that's first-degree murder. The jury, I think, was a little hesitant on some of the evidence. They're like, let's just split the difference, which is pretty common.
Yeah.
They go second degree, and she gets an incredibly light sentence. Mm-hmm. Second degree can be higher than 20 years and 9 months. It can be 25, 30 years. So, it's hard to know.
But nobody can do the math, so.
It's just, might as well just, it's like random, like, who knows? Like, I say a number of years, but who knows what you'll do?
Hold on, we're playing D&D. How long to give this person a sentence? Hold on, let me roll some dice. 20 years, 9 months.
Yeah, what a system. It's frightening. So, in terms of thoughts on this case, like guilt, innocence, we'll start with you, Jeff. What do you think here?
Well, my answer is I don't know. But I think before we started this episode, I was more on the side of guilt. But of course, there was that lingering thing of course, no physical evidence. And at the crime scene, she's an 18-year-old. Doesn't seem like she's a criminal mastermind. So for her to not have any evidence anywhere of her being a part of that murder scene was like, I don't know, I can't really, So I would probably have said like 55% guilt, 45% innocent. But I think after talking about this more, I think I would go more on the side of innocence. Percentage-wise, I don't even know. All right, so maybe I flip it. So 55% innocent, 45% guilty. But, that's so close to 50-50. There's a lot of things that really indicate either way, and a lot of unknowns here. We didn't talk about this, but she ran over to the neighbor's house, saying, my house gotten broken into. He gets his gun. They run back over. She runs into the house.
Passes him.
Right.
Yeah.
And he thought that was weird. Like, wait a minute. I have the gun. There's somebody in here, right? You said there's somebody in here? Or you think there's somebody in here? So, all right, that's weird.
The investigators even said, well, why didn't she wait for the person with the gun to enter the home? Mm-hmm. She went running straight in. But she went running straight into the back sunroom to get the phone to call the police.
Right.
And she stayed right where she was in the sunroom. Like, she called the police, and then she grabbed her cat and was wailing inconsolably on the ground right there. That is a little bit weird, but at the same time, if you're high on adrenaline, you don't always think about, oh, well, maybe I should wait for the person with the gun to secure this scene. You're just like, no, I got to call the car. I got to call police. I got to call for an ambulance. I got to call. And the interesting thing was her verbiage, the words she used. When she went over to the neighbor's house, she didn't say somebody's broken into my house. She said, someone is breaking into my house. My mother is, oh my God, my mother. And she went on, but the verbiage was, is breaking. Like, currently, this is happening right now. Somebody's breaking into my house. And then when she got to the phone, it was somebody broke into my house. It flipped to that.
Yeah. Well, and so there's a lot of different things that point to guilt, a lot that point to innocence, and a lot that are just confusing. Changing stories, of course, and everything. So many people involved that had been at parties with her and that she had called and talked to that night. And so there's a lot of things. And so I will say my mindset shifted a little bit, in terms of my thoughts on this, just while talking about it. But I wouldn't say that I'm any less on the fence or even like unsure than I was before.
Yeah, another one of these cases that glides on a razor's edge. What do you think, Mike?
When we first started looking into this case, I was like, this is the most boring case we've done on this show. Like, on the surface, it was just like, wow, only one person was murdered. Like, and this, and I looked into it, but the more I got into it, I was like, okay, this is a little bit more interesting than it looks at, but it's still, I don't know. Ronnie was way crazier than this.
That was a wild case.
It was a wild case, but Noura, I'm more lean towards Noura didn't do it. Not because I think she's like this innocent person, but more because I think that she was drugged out of her gourd and not there. Like, I don't think she had the presence of mind or presence of body to be able to accomplish what the prosecutors say she did.
Yeah, she's not physically strong.
She had alcohol, cannabis, opioids in her system. At that point, she's barely able to hold her head up. I've seen people who are high, who are that high, and they're just like really, really low and can't move, can't do anything. I've seen people who are less high than that and still on methadone, who have gone through detox on methadone, and you're like nodding out because they're on that. Like, she was a consistent drug user. I've worked with enough of them to realize that, hey, some horrible things can happen when drugs are involved. When someone is high, they don't always make the best decisions. There's a lot of impulse. There can be a lot of rage. People can do some things that we think of as horrible. But they don't usually have the forethought or even the afterthought to take a shower and then clean the bathtub. To try and stage a place like it's been ransacked. The investigators just did a terrible job in this case. Now, I do admit it is possible for Noura to have done this. It's absolutely 100% possible. So I think the likelihood is about 40%. I'm about 40-60.
Okay, 40%. 40% she did it.
40% she did it. 60% she didn't, and that 60% is based on the fact that she was high as a kite. She was as Cat Williams once said, higher than high. I can see my house from here, Lord. I don't want to be this high. Like, that's how high she was at that time. Having taken one person said they saw her take 3 Lortabs, and then she was using other substances too. I mean, I don't know if I could see someone that intoxicated stabbing someone 50 times. And then cleaning up all the evidence. I could see them stabbing someone 50 times, but then sitting there next to them going, I'm going to take a nap now, because the presence of mind just isn't there. when someone's that intoxicated. That's why I'm 60% that she didn't do it, 40% that she did, because she absolutely could have. Mm-hmm. Maybe she got lucky with the cleanup.
Or the investigators were terrible, which I think they demonstrated repeatedly.
They absolutely were.
Yeah.
But it's also possible that, her father did have a tape or CD or something that showed somebody in a compromising position in a limousine that he owned, and that's why he was murdered.
He could have had drugs. He could have had drug money.
He could have had drugs. Of course, Noura could have killed him the year beforehand because she wanted to inherit all of the stuff he had. Mm-hmm. And then, when she wasn't getting it, she killed her mom to try and inherit all of her stuff. But I don't know. 60-40. That's my stance.
And you were 55.
45. Yep.
You're 45 guilt and 55
innocent.
Right. All right.
What do you think, Dr. Grande?
This is tough. I mean, you have a young woman who was, I think, definitely rebellious, a lot of bad behavior, a lot of criminal behavior in jail, and that's never a good sign. When somebody goes to jail and they continue to commit offenses, and they go to prison and they continue to commit offenses, even though they could earn good time and get out, which was ostensibly her goal. I can see where the prosecution was going with, she was on a bad path, and she was hanging out with people who also used a lot of drugs and had a weird overnight schedule of partying. I don't think it's outrageous that she worked alone, but more likely, I think she had accomplices. 1, 2, that she was like, hey, we can, maybe we can intimidate my mom and get some money, and something got out of hand, and there's some stabbing occurred, and they just ran. They're gone. So all the evidence, all the blood, DNA, whatever, they just took it with them. They were never found. And she's left to kind of figure it out, but she got involved a little, and she cut that hand. I can't get past that cut. And, she had multiple stories for the cut. She hid the cut initially. It was bleeding actively just an hour before she called 911. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That looks really bad, especially with a stabbing. Stabbings, people cut their hands all the time with that. That's a classic association.
But again, that cut is usually on the inside of the palm, not the back of the hand.
Yeah, but, I don't know. I struggle with that. Why lie about it? Why not say, look, I want to be clear, I cut this, and here's how I did it, and, just...
Okay. Again, if she didn't remember how she got it, which is entirely possible given her intoxication, it may not have occurred to her to mention anything. Oh, yeah, I got this cut here, until somebody said, hey, where'd you get that cut? Like, oh, I've got a cut. Oh, crap. Yeah, I got a cut. Mm-hmm. How did I get this?
Yeah. Well,
I think it was beer bottles.
Yeah, she very well could have been accidental. It was a terrible coincidence for her.
Absolutely. If it was a coincidence. And like I said, it could have been a stab. But the one of the things we haven't touched on was the murder weapon. They actually didn't retrieve the murder weapon.
Never found.
But one of the medical examiners said that it was most likely 2 different weapons that inflicted wounds. One being a straight bladed knife, the other one being a serrated knife.
Right.
Because there was a wound on her chin on Jennifer's chin that was wavy like a serrated knife, like it had been put or like smacked into by the side. So it kind of left a divot in the shape of the serration. So they knew there were serrations there. But most of the other cuts or stabs had straight edged cuts to them, which they clarified the difference between a cut and a stab. A stab is deeper, a cut is longer, and not as deep. So, if you stab and then pull, that's, I think, still counts as one stab.
Yeah, I guess it's one. Yeah, and a cut.
But if you go across the top, even if it goes down halfway down, it's a cut. So there was cuts and stabs on Jennifer, and most of them were from a straight bladed knife, but some of them could have been from a serrated knife. She said it could have been one knife that had serrations on one side and flat on the other, but it had to have been thin.
Right. Yeah. So murder weapon definitely was used. Right. There was definitely edged weapons.
She was murdered,
and they were not recovered, whatever they were. And again, that's like, how could somebody like Noura, who appears to be disorganized, get rid of that weapon? There was a drop of blood on the front step, possibly from like clothes or the murder weapon, and it dripped off. Somebody left. or, well, had to be leaving, I guess, yeah.
It is also possible that it came from Noura. She had blood on her shoes because she went into the bedroom
Right.
to check her mom. She had some blood from that on her. If that was on her shoelace, which had some blood on it, and as she was running, it flicked off onto the front steps and some of the hallway. It's very easily possible that was that cast off from that. But again, investigators didn't really do a good job of trying to figure that out.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, they left tons of reasonable doubt. No question there was reasonable doubt. Like, I'm fine with that. I would probably say, though, is 60% likelihood that she's guilty. And, I can picture a situation where she's like, come over, we'll break out this window, I'll let you in the garage, close the door, and then you break out this window, whatever. And, maybe the intent wasn't murder. Like, I can live with the second degree. Well, even the voluntary manslaughter, which it is now, right? But it was second degree at the conviction. Right. But I'm 60% sure she facilitated that homicide. 40%, that was more than you would need for reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm. The house being locked up, to me, is a little bit less of a distinction, because Jennifer's keys were missing and they were never found. So if somebody completely different broke into the house and took her keys, they're going to lock the house up after they left. Make it look like nothing happened. Give them more time to get away. Mm-hmm. And then they toss the keys out somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a case that Noura should have been found not guilty. No question about that. But one of those with her criminal history and her drug use, it just makes you think that maybe she wasn't far away from doing something like this. Also, the greed, like she had a pattern of asking for things, money, and there's a trajectory sometimes to drug use and criminality that's negative.
Yeah. I counted up all the clients I saw at the second rehab I worked at. 2 years spent working there. I had 350 clients. Mm. I can count on one hand the number of people who killed someone.
It was definitely rare.
And both of those incidents were accidental. They were DUI related. Mm-hmm. I was driving a car and got into an accident and killed him. 350 clients, and not one single person actively committed a murder. There were some who had murders happen around them. May have been minimizing their own involvement in it, but it was usually something like, well, we were both sitting in the car and a bullet came from outside into the car. And but you incited that. I can't prove that it was incited, but it was things like that. I haven't seen anyone who kind of was like, yeah, I murdered my mom. It's usually like, my mom's a bitch because she won't give me this money. But let me call her real quick and ask if I can get something. It's like, can you send me some money? Can you send me some money? I need money for for snacks and stuff. Or you're not going to send me money? Well, screw you.
Yeah, when they do commit murder, I have worked with people who have caused the deaths of other people, and who are involved in substance use. But I think that a lot of the time it's not an organized. Like, there's no question who did it. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm a suspect in this high profile thing you see on the newspaper. No, it's like they confessed, or they were caught passed out holding a weapon, like a baseball bat at the scene or whatever. They're also not typically as lethal because they tend to be weaker. Like, chronic drug use definitely makes people weaker and less accurate in a fight, and really just, sometimes they get beat up in the attack.
And that's when they're actually sober. When they're actually intoxicated, it's way worse.
Right. Yeah, so, she had indications that she was in a bad direction, even post or pre-conviction, pre-trial, post-conviction. I'll go at 60%, but again, I think reasonable doubt's more like 90, 95. To me, it's like 95. Research articles say 90, but I would, like, if I was on a jury, I'd have to be 95% sure. The investigators, the state with all the money, all their power, they have to do their job. Make me 95% sure. She's nowhere near that.
Yeah.
So, very tragic case. In all this, I think the victim just gets lost. Jennifer, only 39, living her life, making good money, comfortable, and just wiped out by who knows who and who knows why.
Her daughter or somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, somebody who seemed to be pretty angry at her and not really well prepared for a murder. It was sloppy.
Right.
Blood everywhere, 50 times, overkill. So,
but they were ready to go inside and cut the glass, though. So they definitely thought about something.
Right. Hot Shots, Part 2. I think it was Hot Shots Part 2.
With the glass.
With the
glass.
You think that's what it was?
I think so. I
Okay.
really do.
Okay. I can't picture what they would have been doing in the second one, where they would have been dealing with glass, but it's quite possible.
Breaking into Saddam's house, into his compound. It would have been President Benson.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. I guess we'll have to watch it.
I'll have to go back. I could be wrong about that. If you remember what the scene is, put it in the comments.
We also we had said before we started recording we were going to describe what was on the tables and up there. So I guess this is a treat for whoever stayed to the end.
Yeah, so we'll start. Let's start with the board, and then we'll get to the items.
The board.
So the items we used here, the novelty.
The murder weapons that we have, the novelty size.
They're
are huge.
they're actually kind of scary.
They are.
Yeah, Mike, you wouldn't go near it.
No,
They're like
it's bad enough they're right behind me on this thing. Like,
I can't.
I'm afraid one of them is going to fall out and clonk me on the head.
But interestingly, they're not really heavy.
No, they're not.
Yeah. Then we have, of course, red yarn, also novelty oversized. Everything's novelty oversized. So
because we're novelty oversized. At least I am.
we have the Post-it notes, the Sharpies in many colors, and then Mike, describe the board to us.
So, well, our board is our Post-it notes of clues from different things. We've got some that could pertain to this case. I got a wicker basket here, long sleeve shirt, small cut on the left hand, all things we've talked about from this case. But then we have things from other cases and some of the videos that you've done on your other channel. I mean, I personally like this one. Like 88 miles per hour plus 1.21 gigawatts. What? That's a clue, something.
Yeah. So we're trying to spice up the set a bit and add little things that connect to different videos and different cases. How about the objects? You made all these, Mike, right? All these.
I did. Well, not all of them. There's one item I did not make. It came to me in a loot crate several years ago, and that's the hoverboard right there.
Okay.
But I did create all of these on a 3D printer. Actually, I have 2 3D printers at home. One that does PLA, one that does resin. So most of these things are a combination of the two. Starting over there, we've got an old school movie camera, because in honor of our love of movies and of the movie part, which we've got going to be posted pretty soon.
Mm-hmm, that's right. Back to the Future coming up.
Back to the Future. Yeah, we got a skull with an axe in it right over there, just because I thought it was kind of fun to do that one. Of course, we got the hoverboard. We have our alien friend Larry over here.
Oh, I didn't realize he had a name.
I just named him. It's Larry. Larry the alien.
That's a new development.
New developments.
Does Larry have a brother Daryl and another brother Daryl?
We've got our placard here, which just says the murder part. Which the first time it showed up, you might not have noticed. You can go back and check. This little chalk outline guy wasn't here. He was added later. On my table here, we've got a UFO, the shining beam. It actually lights up. It's pretty cool. Of course, the DeLorean with our flame tracks. This little guy here, you might not be able to see very well, but he is a lizard. So we've got our alien on there, our lizard here. In honor of the Jeff Pelly case, we have our new addition tonight is a bow tie, is of the prom night murders. Mm-hmm. Little bow tie right there. The easiest to see, the second easiest to see, I think, at this point is the knife with the blood splatter.
Mm-hmm.
And that knife, you told me, was modeled after a movie with Mike Myers?
Michael Myers, yeah. The Halloween. Yeah, it was modeled after the knife used by Michael Myers in the Halloween franchise in the first couple of movies. And moving over to Jeff's table here, we've got a grave site, which was really wonderful for me to put together. It was really fun.
Very intricate. Obviously, you're looking at it on camera, but in person, very intricate. A lot of detail on all of these.
Yeah. We've got this one as a bullet with a cross section taken out of it. If you can't see, it has gunpowder, primer, casing, and the lead tip. There's our humanoid here, which is the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci in 3D, painted gold. And then the last one over there, that is a collection of the tokens from Clue, the board game, blown up and painted, and then glued all together. So, and we're going to be doing. I've got more on the works that I'm going to be adding. So,
Excellent.
So not only did Mike make these, but he also painted them.
Yeah.
And there's, like I said, there's a lot of detail in these things. So Mike, you're pretty meticulous with these things. And like with the spaceship, it didn't come like that, right? Obviously, you can't print electronics into things. So you had to, put the light in there and battery and everything. So a lot of detail in these. Really awesome.
I try. It's a fun hobby to have. So I'm going to be trying to, as we move forward, like the Jeff Pally bow tie, make little tchotchkes and little things that apply to the cases that we're doing. I'm thinking, and you can put your things in the comments, but I'm thinking it's going to be a wicker basket. Like I'll make a little wicker basket, paint it up, and it can go on one of the desks over here. And then I'm thinking about going back for previous cases and trying to find that. I'm trying to find a way to encapsulate Ronnie's hair in a 3D model somehow. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it, but we'll find something. Maybe I'll just print a little white devil or something.
You have to put it on like one of the Simpsons characters' head or something. So we talk about the Simpsons often enough. Might as well add them in there somewhere.
I'm working on one for Bhagwan Rajneesh. It's going to be a syringe.
Oh, very good.
Because the attempt on his doctor's life, which actually broke up the whole thing in Utah. So that's going to be in there. That'll be good.
Very good.
That's good.
Very good. Yeah, so trying to populate the set with more
and you got the other
creative
two things on the table over there.
Got my books, which are available on Amazon. This harm reduction comes out in, I think, September. And we're making this in August, right? We're in August?
Yes.
August something.
Yeah. It's
I'm
the
lucky I know the month.
19th, 18th? 18th.
18th?
Yeah,
August
Okay.
18th currently.
Yeah, if I can narrow
Deadline. August 18th.
If I can narrow it down to the month, that's pretty good with this with the Corona lockdown and such, not going out too often. But yeah, harm reduction. This is fiction, and the psychology of notorious serial killers is nonfiction, and it's already out. So yeah, we're populating the set. If you have any other ideas, I've been tossing around the idea of some shelves. I also have another cork board, which was ordered by accident, which does happen once in a while.
Amazon screws up all the time.
Well, I don't know if it was their mistake, but it was a mistake. Let's say that. But I mean, I got plenty of yarn, so we could put that up there, and I have plenty of these oversized thumbtacks. So as far as the case of Noura Jackson or anything else, please put your thoughts in the comments. We read each one and really appreciate them. And of course, we get ideas for other podcasts, not only murder parts, but alien, lizard, humanoids, and the movie part. And there's a movie part coming out soon, Back to the Future, which is very good. We've been working on it in post-production.
There's a lot of fun to do. I do want to say, the lizard does not currently have a name. I'm open to names from the comments. We'll figure out what we should name the lizard. Larry is our alien over there. We'll have a name for our lizard from you guys in the comments. And then, of course, the Vitruvian Man doesn't need a name. It's got a fairly famous one already.
Yes, so yeah, please, any thoughts in the comments? We really appreciate it. We will be back pretty soon with another episode of The Murder Part and other episodes. I want to thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon.